In the land of Farron, where magic pulses through the earth and ancient creatures roam, a group of unlikely heroes finds themselves bound together by a singular goal: to reclaim a stolen relic that could alter the course of history. Edgin, a former bard turned thief, once had it all: family, fame, and fortune. But a tragic betrayal shattered his world, leaving him with nothing but a burning desire for redemption. Alongside him is Halga, a fierce warrior with a heart as strong as her blade; Simon, a charming but self-doubting rogue whose skills with magic are only rivaled by his wit; and Doric, a shape-shifting druid struggling to reconcile her past with the ever-present danger of the present. Their quest for the relic begins as a simple mission of vengeance, but soon they find themselves tangled in a web of deceit, dark magic, and dangerous allies. An ancient tablet with the power to reshape reality itself is now in the hands of those who would use it to enslave the realm. Along the way, betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, and every choice threatens to unravel their fates. In a world where honor is as fragile as the lives they lead, these thieves must learn that it is not just what you steal that matters, but what you are willing to fight for. With the fate of Farron hanging in the balance, they will soon discover that their greatest enemy may not be the one they face with steel in hand, but the darkness that lies within themselves. Chapter 1: The Thief's Code. The cold wind howled through the narrow alleyways of Waterdeep, the city's towering stone buildings offering little protection against the bitter chill of the approaching winter. Lanterns flickered along the cobblestone streets, casting long, jagged shadows across the ground. In this part of the city, those shadows held secrets whispered among thieves, assassins, and anyone else trying to survive the harsh realities of a world ruled by the powerful. Edgin Darvian was no stranger to those secrets. He'd spent most of his life weaving through them like a skilled musician playing a delicate tune on his lute, except the notes he struck were often the ones you didn't hear until it was too late. "Another one of your plans gone sideways, Edgin?" Halga's voice broke the silence, sharp and full of a familiar, playful challenge. Edgin didn't need to look up to know she was standing there, arms crossed, her heavy armor glinting dimly in the pale lantern light. Halga was impossible to miss. She had the broad shoulders and solid frame of a seasoned fighter, and a presence that seemed to fill whatever room she entered. Despite the deadly seriousness that always lingered in her eyes, she had a way of lightening the mood without even trying. Most of the time, it was a welcome distraction. The half-elf bard shifted in his seat, brushing a lock of his dark hair behind his ear. He'd been nursing a mug of stale ale for the better part of an hour, trying to think through the mess they'd just narrowly escaped. He wasn't used to thinking about failure. Not for long anyway. But today, it seemed like every plan he set in motion had crumbled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. "We didn't get caught, did we?" Edgin replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Halga's smirk was immediate. "Barely. And you didn't get the relic either. So tell me, what exactly was the point of that stunt?" "Get the map, figure out where the tablet is, and if possible, make it out without burning the whole place down," he answered, his voice low. He didn't sound too confident, but at least he had the decency to sound regretful. His gaze flicked across the cluttered table, littered with a few scraps of parchment and old, crumpled coins. It was the kind of space thieves were accustomed to, disorganized but useful, filled with the tools of their trade. "So I guess you could say it didn't go as planned." Halga chuckled, but the sound was soft, as if she was trying not to let the humor fade too quickly. "You're going to keep pulling this off, right? Getting what you want without actually getting your hands dirty." "Look at you," Edgin said with a sly grin. "You want me to go in with a sword and start chopping people up? You'd be better at that." "Maybe." Halga leaned back in her chair, giving him a searching look. She was always blunt, but there was something else in her eyes today. Something that wasn't all humor or frustration. "Maybe you're getting too comfortable with this whole thief thing. You know, the part where we steal from people who deserve it." Edgin's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything at first. She wasn't wrong, not entirely. He had built a life, no, an existence, on the idea that if he could outwit, outthink, or outrun the people chasing him, he could keep going, keep surviving. A world of thieves, assassins, and spies didn't need heroes, after all. It needed people like him. People who didn't ask questions and didn't care too much about the consequences. But that had all changed when the relic, the tablet, a magical artifact of immense power, was stolen. It was more than just treasure. It was a key to something even darker. And Edgin had sworn to himself that he'd get it back, whatever the cost. "Maybe you're right," he admitted, his voice softening. But there's more at stake now. This isn't about surviving anymore. Helga gave a short nod, her expression shifting as she took his words in. She had always understood what it meant to be driven by something bigger than self-preservation. It was a strange feeling, one that made her uneasy, but there was no denying that Edgen had changed. "We'll get it," she said firmly, breaking the tension. "We just need to do it right next time. And no more running headfirst into traps." Before Edgen could respond, a voice interrupted them. Well, if it isn't the infamous Edgen Darvian, still spinning his web of half-baked plans." Simon's voice was smooth, with just the right amount of mocking charm. He appeared out of nowhere, slipping silently into the dimly lit corner of the room. His face was painted with an easy smile, and his dark hair fell effortlessly across his forehead. But there was something about the way he stood that made you wonder if he were always sizing people up, always thinking several steps ahead. He was good at what he did, almost too good for his own comfort. Simon had always been the rogue of the group, a charming thief who never seemed to take anything too seriously, except for when it mattered. "You're late," Edgen said, not bothering to look up. "And you're making my drink look bad." "Forgive me," Simon said, his grin widening. He walked to the bar, leaning over it as he ordered a drink. "I was busy making sure our last attempt didn't leave us with more scars than we came with. Though, I have to say, I almost admire the way you think you can just walk into any situation and expect it to work out." He returned to the table, sliding into a chair with ease. "What's next? A bigger heist?" "Next, we figure out how to make sure we don't end up on the wrong side of a warlord's blade," Edgen muttered. "That's all we can do right now. We'll regroup, get a better plan, and—" Before he could finish, the door to the small, dimly lit tavern burst open. The trio turned sharply, eyes narrowing. Standing in the doorway was Doric, her dark eyes scanning the room like a hawk looking for its prey. She was a druid, but she didn't look like the kind who would calmly whisper to nature. No, Doric had a wildness to her, raw, untamed, and always ready to fight if necessary. The tattoos on her skin seemed to shimmer in the low light, a reminder that she had more in her arsenal than most people realized. "I've got news," she said curtly, her voice low and serious. She tossed a small satchel onto the table. "It's not just the tablet we need to worry about. Safina's involved, and she's not working alone." The room grew tense as her words settled in the air. The mention of Safina's name was enough to make the blood in Edgen's veins run cold. Safina was a powerful sorceress, and in the wrong hands, her magic could turn the tide of any battle. It wasn't just about getting the tablet back anymore. It was about stopping an ancient evil from taking root. "Let's go," Edgen said suddenly, his determination igniting. "We don't have much time." With that, the thieves set off into the night. But this time, their quest wasn't about getting rich or surviving. This time, they were after something much more dangerous and much more important. Edgen led the group through the twisting alleys of Waterdeep, the city's shadows now a cloak of secrecy. His mind was already working through their options, calculating the risks of every choice they made. Safina. That name lingered in the air like a bad omen, and it didn't help that Doric's news had cast a dark shadow over the group's spirits. Safina wasn't just a sorceress, she was a force of nature, as cunning as she was dangerous. Her involvement in the tablet's theft meant the stakes had just been raised. Edgen knew they had to act fast if they were to prevent whatever dark plan she was weaving. "I didn't expect Safina's name to come up tonight," Simon muttered, his voice tight with unease. He was walking close behind Edgen, his usual cocky grin absent, replaced by a rare expression of concern. "Last I heard, she was trying to play both sides, keeping her loyalties in the shadows. We'll need to be extra careful." "Careful, yes," Helga added, her voice gruff but calm. She'd been through countless battles, and while the physical threat of Safina wasn't what worried her, the unknown magic she wielded was. "But we're not getting anywhere with just talking. If we don't move fast, she might already be too far ahead." Doric, walking alongside them, cast a sharp glance at Edgen. "I've heard whispers in the circles I frequent," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who moved between worlds, not quite human but not fully something else. "The tablet has the power to control minds, to warp the will of anyone it touches. Safina might be planning to use it on the entire city, or worse. She's no fool. If she has the tablet, she has control over whoever's in charge." Edgen's mind raced. The relic they were after was powerful, yes. But if Safina was using it to manipulate the powerful people in Waterdeep, they had far less time than they thought. "You're right," Edgin said finally, slowing his pace as they turned a corner, the crumbling buildings of the lower district crowding them in. We're not just after treasure anymore. We're up against something much darker. But we're not alone in this fight. We have each other. There was silence for a moment as his words settled in. Each of the companions had their own reasons for being there, their own struggles and wounds. But in the end, it always came down to this. They fought together, because that's what they had left. Right, Simon said with a forced chuckle. Because when in doubt, we rely on our not-quite-legal skills to save the day. Just keep your head on straight, Helga snapped back. No room for distractions this time. They arrived at the hidden door to their safe house, a rundown building tucked between two merchant stalls, shrouded in darkness. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of old parchment and the faint echo of things long forgotten. The walls were lined with maps, journals, and scraps of information Edgin had gathered over the years, bits and pieces of a life built on lies and deception. The room was silent except for the crackling of a small fire in the corner. Edgin pulled out the map they had stolen earlier from the Thieves' Guild, spreading it across the table. The weathered parchment had an odd, almost magical aura to it, and the ink seemed to shift as if it had a life of its own. Doric leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning the map, tracing the lines with a quiet intensity. This, she muttered, this is more than just a map. It's a guide, one meant to lead to the location of the relic. And we need to be quick. If Safina is already on her way to this place, she'll be there before us, Edgin finished, his gaze darkening. Which means we don't have the luxury of waiting for daylight, Simon interjected. We'll need to make our move tonight. Edgin nodded grimly. There was no other choice. They had no time to waste. I'll scout ahead, Doric offered, her voice like the calm before a storm. I can shift into something small and sneak past any patrols or traps. Stay behind, and I'll let you know when it's safe. No, Edgin said immediately, stopping her in her tracks. You're not going alone. We're a team. We stick together. I've done this before, Edgin, she said, her expression firm but understanding. If you're right and Safina's already involved, she'll have laid traps, magic, soldiers, maybe even creatures lurking in the dark. You'll slow me down. I said no, Edgin repeated, his voice sharper now. He could see the debate flicker across Doric's face, but he wasn't about to back down. Helga stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on Edgin's shoulder. You're not wrong, Edgin. But she's right about one thing. We've got to move fast. No time to waste. Doric caught her breath, nodding reluctantly. She understood their concern, but her instincts told her the risks were greater than they knew. Fine, she said, her voice tight but calm. But we move quickly. The longer we stay in one place, the more vulnerable we become. Edgin let out a breath, motioning for the group to prepare. The night was falling, and they had a long journey ahead of them. Get your gear, he ordered, turning to the others. We'll leave in an hour. And stay alert. Whatever happens next, we do it together. As the team prepared, the tension in the air thickened. Each of them had their own quiet moments of reflection before setting out on the next stage of their mission. Edgin, though a seasoned thief, couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far darker than they had ever encountered. In his quiet moments, he wondered if they were already too late to stop Safina and the chaos she intended to bring. But as the group gathered at the door, ready for the journey ahead, he pushed those thoughts aside. There was no turning back. Not now. They moved out into the night, their footsteps muffled by the cobblestone streets as they headed towards the heart of Waterdeep, the city's underbelly, where the line between friend and foe was blurred and the shadows held far more than secrets. Their adventure had begun. Chapter 2. The Depths of Waterdeep. The moon hung high over the city of Waterdeep, casting pale light over its sprawling streets and alleys. The night was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. There was an unease that seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. For Edgin and his companions, it was a quiet that didn't comfort but warned. It wasn't long before the sounds of the city faded behind them, swallowed up by the dark labyrinth of lower Waterdeep. They moved quickly, staying close to the shadows, careful to avoid the patrols that might be sent out after the mess they'd left behind at the Thieves' Guild. The city felt like it was closing in around them, its tall buildings casting long, sharp shadows, and the scent of salt water and soot filling the air. I hate the lower district, Simon muttered, his voice low as he darted behind a crumbling building, eyes scanning for any sign of danger. It's like a labyrinth down here. You can't trust anyone. Holga grunted in agreement, her boots thumping softly against the cobblestones. It's worse than I remember. Too many places to hide, too many ways for things to go wrong. Doric, ever watchful, led the way, her senses heightened, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. She'd lived in the wilds, on the fringes of civilization, but even the most primal instincts could be useful in the darkest corners of a city like this. Her movements were silent, as fluid as the wind. I've seen worse, Doric said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I agree there's something off tonight. Feels like we're being watched. Edgin nodded, trying to shake the sense of impending doom that had settled in his chest. The tablet they sought, this ancient relic of immense power, had the ability to shape the world in unimaginable ways. It was a tool of unimaginable influence, and Safina, the sorceress with a mind as dangerous as her magic, was already on the move. They couldn't afford to waste time or allow the relic to fall into the wrong hands. They arrived at a narrow, dimly lit street, a place so tucked away that it was easy to believe it could go unnoticed for years. But it was far from unnoticed. To those in the know, this alleyway was a key to the hidden heart of Waterdeep's underbelly. A secret passage, one that led to old catacombs beneath the city, the lost tunnels, the forgotten caverns where only the bravest or the most foolish dared venture. Are you sure this is it? Simon asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. He wasn't one to take unnecessary risks, and the idea of entering a series of ancient tunnels without knowing exactly what lay within unsettled him. This is the fastest route, Edgin replied, his voice firm. He didn't like it any more than Simon did, but there was no choice. Safina's already got a head start. We need to catch up. Doric walked forward, pushing aside the heavy, rusted grate that led down into the darkness. After you then, she said, a flicker of amusement in her voice. Holga gave a short laugh, though it was more from nervousness than humor. As much as I love dark tunnels, let's get this over with. One by one, they descended into the depths, the air growing damp and musty with each step. The stone walls of the tunnel were slick with moisture, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the passage. The only light came from the dim glow of Doric's enchanted amulet, which she had worn for years, an ancient gift from a long-lost mentor. It gave off a pale, eerie light, just enough to see by, but not enough to reveal everything that lurked in the corners. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the weight of the city above pressed down on them, and the ancient stone beneath their feet seemed to whisper of forgotten histories, of people long gone and things better left undisturbed. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a large, open chamber. The walls of this room were covered in old symbols and faded murals, depicting scenes of ancient battles, long-forgotten kings, and strange, powerful creatures. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, cracked and weathered with age. This is it, Edgin said, his voice tight with urgency. He moved forward, examining the pedestal closely. The tablet should be here. He reached out, his hand hovering over the stone surface. But before he could make contact, a voice echoed from the shadows, sending a chill down his spine. Did you really think it would be that easy? The voice was smooth, dripping with venom. Edgin's hand froze in place, and the rest of the group tensed, immediately reaching for their weapons. From the darkness emerged a figure, draped in a cloak of midnight blue, with eyes that glowed faintly like embers in the dark. Safina. Her presence was commanding, powerful, and utterly terrifying. I knew you'd come here eventually, she said, a slow, mocking smile curling at the corners of her lips. I'm impressed you've managed to stay alive this long, but I fear your luck is running out. You've got no idea who you're dealing with, Edgin said, trying to sound confident, though the knot in his stomach was growing tighter with every passing second. Safina was no ordinary foe. She was a master of dark magic, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Oh, I know exactly who you are, Edgin Darvian, Safina said, her voice soft, almost sweet. I've been watching you for quite some time now. You and your little group of misfits. Holga stepped forward, her hand on the hilt of her sword, her eyes narrowed with fury. What do you want with the tablet, Safina? Safina laughed, the sound eerie and hollow. What do I want? I want what's mine, of course. What you've been foolishly chasing after. She raised her hands, and the room seemed to shift around them. The air grew heavy, charged with raw power. It was as if the very stones of the chamber were vibrating with her magic. You've failed, Safina continued, her voice now colder, more dangerous. You can't stop me. The tablet is already mine, and soon, I will have the power to shape the world in my image. All your little plans, all your tricks, nothing will stop me. Why do this? Edgen asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Why destroy everything? Destroy, Safina echoed, her eyes flashing with a mix of amusement and contempt. No, Edgen. I won't destroy it all. I will remake it. There's a difference. The world is broken, and I will fix it. I will give people what they truly want: power, control, eternal life. She took a step closer, and the shadows seemed to follow her, curling around her like a cloak. And when I'm done, no one will stand in my way. Not you. Not anyone. Edgen's heart raced. He knew they had to act now. You're wrong. We won't let you do this. He turned to the others. Doric now. Doric's eyes glinted in the dim light as she muttered an incantation under her breath. She closed her eyes, and in an instant her form shifted, her body contorting as she transformed into a large, sleek panther. With a roar, she pounced, her claws tearing through the air toward Safina. But Safina was faster. With a flick of her wrist, a surge of dark magic shot out, slamming into Doric and sending her crashing into the wall. No! Halga shouted, rushing forward, but Safina raised her hand again, this time creating a barrier of dark energy between them. You should have stayed out of this, Halga, Safina said with a sneer. You're nothing but a tool, a pawn in a game far beyond your understanding. The battle was just beginning. The room shook with the weight of their clash, the very walls seeming to hold their breath as magic crackled through the air. But Edgen knew one thing for certain. The fight wasn't just about the tablet. It was about stopping Safina before she could unravel everything. And the cost of failure was something none of them could afford. The room seemed to pulse with energy as Safina's dark magic crackled in the air. Edgen's heart raced, but his mind was already working, calculating their next move. He could see Doric, now in the form of a panther, struggling against the magical barrier, her claws raking the invisible force but unable to break through. Halga was charging forward, her massive frame moving with surprising speed, but Safina didn't even flinch. With a flick of her fingers, the sorceress sent a surge of magic coursing toward her, a twisting black tendril of energy that slammed into Halga, sending her sprawling to the ground with a grunt. Enough of this, Safina said, her voice dripping with disdain. You really think you can stop me? A few thieves and a half-breed elf? Pathetic. Edgen felt his pulse quicken, but he didn't let the fear show. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. He knew Safina's magic was formidable, far beyond anything they'd faced before. But there was one thing that might give them the edge: the tablet. He turned to Simon, who had been hanging back, his fingers twitching nervously near the pouch at his side. Simon, I need you to do what you do best. Distract her. Simon nodded without hesitation, his face lighting up with a sly grin. He knew exactly what Edgen meant. Despite the danger, Simon thrived in chaos. Time to show off, then, Simon said, pulling a handful of glittering dust from his pouch and tossing it into the air. The dust glimmered and swirled around them like a cloud of fireflies, briefly obscuring their vision. For a split second, everything around them went hazy, and Safina's focus wavered. That was all they needed. Now, Edgen shouted. In an instant, he dashed toward the pedestal, his heart pounding in his chest. The tablet was so close, he could almost feel its power. But Safina wasn't finished. With a cry, she snapped her fingers, and a wave of energy surged toward Edgen, knocking him off balance and sending him sprawling to the ground. No, Safina hissed, her eyes flashing with fury. You think you can take it from me? You're too late. Before Edgen could react, Safina was on him, a cruel smile playing across her face as she conjured another bolt of dark energy. But just as it was about to strike, Halga, her chest heaving as she struggled to get to her feet, lunged forward and knocked Safina off balance. The two collided with a crash, and Safina snarled in frustration. You're stubborn, Safina growled, her eyes narrowing as she summoned another burst of magic, sending a shockwave through the room. It was too much, too powerful. But in that moment, Doric, still in the form of the panther, leaped forward with a ferocity that only an animal could possess. She swiped her claws at Safina, forcing the sorceress to stumble back. Get away from him, Doric roared, her voice raw and primal as she grappled with Safina, knocking her away from Edgen just long enough for him to regain his footing. Edgen wasted no time. He scrambled to the pedestal, fingers trembling as he reached for the tablet. It felt warm to the touch, pulsing with energy, almost as if it was alive. He could hear Safina's enraged voice behind him, but he didn't dare look back. With a final push, he gripped the tablet and yanked it from the pedestal. The entire room seemed to shift as a powerful surge of energy erupted from the tablet. The ground beneath them trembled, and the walls cracked with the force of the magical backlash. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The air was thick with power, dangerous, untamed, and chaotic. Then, as quickly as it had come, the surge of energy subsided. The room was still, but everything had changed. Safina was no longer in control. The tablet had shifted the balance of power, its magic now coursing through Ejin's veins. He could feel its energy like fire, searing through his body, urging him to unleash its full potential. "No," Safina said, her voice low, barely a whisper as she glared at him. "You don't understand what you're holding. You think you've won, but this is only the beginning." Ejin's breath came in ragged gasps, his mind spinning from the overwhelming power he now held. It felt wrong, as if the magic were trying to consume him. He fought against it, but he could already feel it pulling at him, urging him to use it. "You're wrong," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "We've won because we know what you're capable of, and we won't let you have this power." Safina's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a snarl. "You think you can control it? You think you can wield something this powerful without consequences?" Ejin didn't respond. He couldn't. The tablet's power was too overwhelming, and he could feel the weight of Safina's words sinking in. But there was no turning back now. With a cry of frustration, Safina extended her hands, summoning a dark wave of energy toward them. It shot toward Ejin like a bolt of lightning, but before it could hit, Doric leaped forward, her body shifting midair into a large winged form, an eagle. She swooped down, wings outstretched, and collided with Safina, knocking her backward with the force of the impact. Safina staggered, her face twisted in fury. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing compared to what's coming." Ejin took a step back, clutching the tablet tightly as the power surged through him, threatening to overwhelm him. He could see the anger in Safina's eyes, but there was something more, something darker. She wasn't just angry, she was desperate. "You're finished, Safina," Ejin said, trying to steady his breath, though the pull of the tablet's power made it hard to concentrate. "You won't get what you want. Not this time." With a final, furious growl, Safina turned on her heel and fled into the shadows. She vanished as quickly as she had come, leaving only the sound of her retreating footsteps behind. Ejin stood there, his body trembling, the tablet still clutched in his hands. His companions gathered around him, their expressions a mix of relief and concern. "You did it," Simon said, his voice shaky as he stepped forward, eyeing the tablet warily. "But, are you okay?" Ejin's heart was pounding in his chest, but he couldn't answer. The power inside him was growing stronger, and with each passing moment, he could feel its grip tightening around his mind. The tablet was still alive, still waiting to be used. Doric landed lightly on the ground, her form shifting back to her elven shape as she looked at Ejin with concern. "Ejin," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "You have to let it go. We can't afford to let this power control you." But Ejin didn't hear her. All he could hear was the hum of the tablet's magic, calling to him. Chapter 3. The Weight of Power. The chamber was silent, save for the slow, steady beat of Ejin's heart as he stood motionless, the tablet clutched tightly in his hands. He could feel its power now, coursing through him like an unrelenting wave, pushing against the edges of his consciousness. Every thought was clouded by its presence, every breath drawn with effort. It was as if the world around him had faded into a distant echo, leaving only the tablet and the pulse of magic that came from within. His companions were watching him carefully, but none of them spoke. They could sense the danger in the air, the way the energy in the room seemed to shift when Ejin touched the tablet. It wasn't just the relic's power that filled the space, it was the fear, the uncertainty, and the dark allure of its promises. "Ejin," Simon finally said, his voice breaking the tense silence. "You need to put it down. We can't control this kind of power. No one can." But Ejin didn't respond. His fingers gripped the tablet even tighter, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the present. He could feel its magic tugging at him, whispering things he couldn't quite understand, things that threatened to consume him if he gave in. And yet, the temptation was overwhelming. The tablet was a tool of unimaginable power, and he could feel it pulling at the deepest parts of his soul, offering him everything he had ever wanted, everything he had ever lost. "No," he muttered under his breath, his voice raw. "I can't." "You can't what?" Holga's voice was hard, but there was concern in her tone, a flicker of fear. She took a step closer, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, her muscles tense. You can't control it? Or you don't want to? Edgen looked at her, his eyes wild, the desperation clear in his expression. It's not like that, he said, his voice shaking. It's calling to me. I can feel it inside of me. It's like it wants me to use it, to bend the world to my will. Doric stepped forward, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. And what if it's lying to you? What if it's manipulating you? Edgen's gaze flickered to her, and for a moment he seemed lost, unsure of the truth. He could feel the weight of the tablet pressing on him, like an invisible hand gripping his chest, urging him to make a choice. The magic within it was overwhelming, but it was also seductive. It offered power, control, the ability to rewrite the world as he saw fit. You don't understand, he whispered, almost to himself. I can fix things. I can make it right. By using this? Simon snapped. By giving in to this thing that clearly wants to corrupt you? Is that what you think will fix it? Edgen shook his head, trying to clear the haze that clouded his mind. But it was growing harder. The tablet's magic was too strong, and with every passing moment, it felt as if it were becoming a part of him. He could see visions of things, distant places, moments from his past, fragments of a future that was too unclear to understand. And through it all, there was the voice of Safina, a faint echo in the back of his mind. The tablet was hers, and she would do anything to take it back. You don't get it, Edgen said again, more forcefully this time, his voice growing darker. This power isn't just for me. It's for all of us. We could change everything. We could make sure no one ever suffers again. You're talking about changing the world with magic, Edgen, Doric said, her voice firm, but her concern clear. You've seen the kind of things Safina can do with it. Do you really want to become like her? Edgen's breath caught in his throat. The thought was enough to send a wave of cold dread through him. But even as the fear settled in, the allure of the tablet grew stronger. The power, the promise, it was hard to resist. You don't have to do this, Holga said, her voice soft but insistent. She stepped closer, her eyes filled with empathy. I know you want to make things right. We all do. But this isn't the way. This is too dangerous. Edgen closed his eyes, trying to focus, trying to shake off the whispers that seemed to come from everywhere. The power that had been given to him was almost too much to bear, like trying to hold back an ocean with his hands. It was an effort just to breathe. But the more he fought it, the harder it became to hold on. The tablet pulsed in his grip, its magic like a current of electricity running through him, feeding off his doubts, amplifying his fears, twisting them into something darker. The world seemed to shift again, and Edgen's vision blurred. He saw Safina's face, her eyes burning with hatred, her mouth twisted in a sneer as she reached out for him, for the tablet. But it wasn't just her he saw. He saw the faces of those he had lost, his family, his friends, those who had fallen in the wake of the chaos he had caused. And in that moment, he realized the truth. The tablet was not just a tool of power. It was a curse. No, Edgen said, his voice hoarse as he took a step back, the reality crashing down on him. I can't do this. But even as he tried to let go, the pull of the tablet was too strong. The magic surged again, louder this time, overwhelming his senses. His hands trembled, and his knees buckled beneath him as the energy inside the tablet seemed to fight against him, urging him to take control, to shape the world to his will. He felt a presence in the room, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to fill the space. A chill ran down his spine, and he looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Safina. She had returned. You should have let me have it, Edgen. Safina's voice echoed through the chamber, cold and filled with venom. You should have given up when you had the chance. Edgen stood frozen, the tablet still clutched in his hands, as Safina stepped out of the shadows, her eyes burning with fury. She had followed them, watched them, waited for the moment when the tablet's power would become too much for Edgen to control. This is mine, Safina hissed, her hands crackling with dark energy. You never should have tried to take it from me. Edgen's body felt like it was on fire, the energy of the tablet coursing through him, threatening to consume him. But something inside him refused to give in. He wasn't going to let Safina win, not again, not after everything they had been through. With a sudden burst of strength, Edgen hurled the tablet toward Doric. She caught it mid-air, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't hesitate. The magic surged, but this time, it wasn't directed at Edgen. The tablet's power was now in Doric's hands, and the balance of the room shifted once more. No! Safina screamed, her hands raised as she summoned a blast of dark magic. But it was too late. The tablet had already been freed from Edgin's grasp. Doric held the tablet high, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, in a flash of light, the power of the tablet erupted, filling the room with a blinding, searing glow. Safina staggered back, her hands raised to shield her eyes from the blinding light. "You think you can control it?" she spat, her voice seething with fury. "You're all fools." But the light grew brighter, and the air crackled with the force of the magic. The room seemed to tremble, the walls shifting, the floor beneath their feet shaking. Edgin could feel the power of the tablet, thrumming like a heartbeat, its energy overwhelming everything in its path. This wasn't just a fight for control. It was a fight for survival. The light from the tablet was blinding, searing the very air around them. It pulsed like a heartbeat, each thrum of magic making the room shudder as if the walls themselves were straining under its weight. Edgin shielded his eyes, but even through the brightness, he could feel the raw power, alive, dangerous, and volatile, radiating from the artifact in Doric's hands. His heart raced. His thoughts were a blur, as if the very presence of the tablet was tearing through his consciousness. He turned to look at Safina. The sorceress staggered back, her face twisted in a mask of fury, eyes wide with disbelief. The dark energy she had been wielding now seemed to dissipate, her magic crumbling before the overwhelming force of the tablet. "No," Safina snarled, her voice a mixture of disbelief and rage. "It's impossible." She raised her hands again, summoning a fresh wave of power to counter the tablet's light. The air between them crackled with dark energy, a swirling storm of magic that threatened to tear the chamber apart. But the tablet, in Doric's hands, pulsed stronger, fighting against the sorceress's magic as if it had a mind of its own. "It's mine," Safina hissed through gritted teeth. "It was always meant to be mine." Doric's hands shook as she held the tablet aloft. The power was overwhelming, more than anything they had expected. It wasn't just the magic, it was the force, the weight of all the worlds it could control, the knowledge, the promises, and the dangers wrapped inside it. She felt like a thread dangling at the edge of a cliff, and the tablet was the abyss pulling her toward it. "Doric!" Edgin shouted, his voice hoarse, as he tried to steady his breathing. "You have to fight it. The tablet isn't just power, it's a curse. If you give in, it will control you too." Doric's eyes flickered to him, momentarily breaking her concentration. She could feel the tablet's pull, the lure of its power tugging at the deepest corners of her mind. It was like the world was opening up to her, showing her visions of things to come. Worlds that could be remade, lives that could be saved, and enemies that could be crushed. All she had to do was reach out, embrace it, and the power would be hers. But she remembered Edgin's words. The tablet wasn't something to be controlled, it was something that consumed. With a final effort, Doric forced herself to focus, her grip tightening around the tablet. She could hear the whispers of the tablet in the back of her mind, promises of dominion and endless power, but she refused to listen. "You don't control me," Doric whispered, her voice shaky but filled with defiance. "I control my own fate." The light from the tablet flickered once more, and in that instant, the room seemed to stretch. The walls groaned, the stone shaking as if the very foundation of the world was threatening to crumble. Safina, seeing her hold on the situation slipping, redoubled her efforts, her magic surging once more in a final, desperate push. "Enough!" Safina screamed. "You cannot stand against me." She released a bolt of dark energy that hurtled toward Doric, a surge of power that threatened to obliterate everything in its path. But before it could reach her, Edgin moved. He wasn't sure how, whether by instinct or by sheer will, but he lunged forward, pulling Doric out of the line of fire just as the bolt of dark magic collided with the ground, exploding in a burst of energy that sent shockwaves through the room. The force of the explosion threw them both back, slamming them into the stone walls. Edgin's head spun, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. Pain shot through his body, but he managed to push himself up, looking frantically for Doric. She was lying on the ground, the tablet still clutched in her hands, but her breathing was shallow, and her eyes were unfocused. She had been hit by the force of Safina's magic, and it had knocked her out cold. "Doric!" Edgin shouted, rushing to her side. He could hear Safina's laughter behind him, cold and mocking. "You're weak," Safina sneered. "All of you are. You can't even protect one another. The tablet is mine, and I will not be denied." Edgin looked up, fury burning in his chest. Safina had already moved toward them, her hands crackling with magic, ready to unleash another devastating attack. But Ejin wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The time for hesitation had passed. He knew now that the tablet's magic was too strong for any one person to control, too dangerous to wield without consequence. But he also knew that Safina couldn't have it, not after everything that had happened, not after all they had fought for. Without thinking, Ejin grabbed the tablet from Doric's hands, his fingers brushing hers for a moment, and he could feel a surge of energy ripple through him. The moment the tablet was in his grip, he felt its power flare up, stronger than before. He gasped, struggling to breathe, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. Safina's gaze locked onto him with pure hatred. "This is not your fight, Ejin," Safina warned, her voice low and deadly. "Give it to me, and I will spare you. Resist, and you will burn." Ejin's hands trembled, but he held onto the tablet. The magic surged inside him, and for a brief moment, he could see everything. The power of the tablet filled his senses, showing him worlds beyond this one, lives to be rewritten, destinies to be shaped. He could feel it in every fiber of his being, the undeniable urge to wield it. But he resisted. "This ends now," Ejin said, his voice steady despite the raging storm of magic inside him. "You're not getting it, Safina. Not this time." With a determined cry, Ejin raised the tablet high above his head, summoning all the strength he could muster. The magic inside him erupted in a blinding light, flooding the room with its intensity. Safina tried to counter with a spell of her own, but it was too late. The power of the tablet overwhelmed everything, her magic, her fury, her hate, until there was nothing left but the blinding light. And then silence. The world seemed to stop. For a brief moment, everything was still, the air heavy with the aftermath of the explosion. Ejin stood, his body trembling, the tablet still in his hands. But the room around him had changed. The walls had shifted, the ground had cracked, and the very fabric of reality seemed to be warping. "Safina," Ejin whispered, his voice hoarse as he looked around. But the sorceress was gone. Vanished, as if she had never been there at all. He felt a strange sense of relief wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by a deep, gnawing fear. They had won for now. But at what cost? Doric groaned from the ground, slowly pushing herself up. Her eyes were filled with confusion, and she looked at Ejin as if seeing him for the first time. "What happened?" she asked, her voice weak but steady. Ejin didn't know how to answer. The power of the tablet was still pulsing through him, still pulling at him, but he could feel it beginning to fade. The magic was fading, and so was the sense of dominance it had given him. We stopped her," Ejin said, his voice trembling. "But I'm not sure how." Simon stepped forward, his face filled with concern. "Ejin, we need to get out of here. The tablet, it's too dangerous." Ejin nodded, his hands still shaking as he looked at the tablet, now dormant in his grip. "I know, but we can't let Safina win. Not after everything we've been through." With a final glance around the room, Ejin turned and began to move toward the exit, the weight of the tablet still heavy in his hands. Their journey was far from over. Chapter 4. The Darkening Path. The cold air of the cavern outside the chamber stung Ejin's lungs as he stepped into the narrow corridor, the tablet still heavy in his hands. He could feel its pulse, rhythmic and constant, like a heartbeat that never faltered. He glanced down at the stone tablet, its surface smooth and flawless, yet somehow it felt alive. The magic within it was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for someone to make the wrong move. Behind him, Doric and Simon helped each other along, their faces pale from the blast and the lingering aftershocks of the power they had just faced. Holga was already moving ahead, her steps purposeful, though her eyes betrayed the concern she felt for the group. Despite their victory over Safina, there was a palpable sense of unease hanging over them all. "We need to leave this place," Holga called over her shoulder, her voice firm. "Before Safina comes back, before whatever this tablet is begins to take us down with it." Ejin didn't reply at first. His mind was too consumed with the tablet. He had managed to hold it long enough to stop Safina's attack, but even now, he felt the energy in his fingertips, like an invisible force gripping him from within. What had happened in the chamber, the explosion of power, the way the world seemed to bend, he knew they couldn't run from it. Whatever this tablet was, it had become a part of them. "I'm not sure we can leave it behind," Ejin finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would make the power inside the tablet stronger. "I don't think it's done with us." "We can't keep it," Doric said from behind him, her voice steady but laced with a clear sense of danger. "It's going to consume all of us if we don't destroy it." Simon, his hands pressed against the side of his head as if trying to steady himself, looked at Edgen. "I don't think that's a choice anymore. Whatever this thing is, it's too powerful. And Safina, if she's still alive, she'll want it back. We can't just walk away." Edgen's gaze lingered on the tablet, the thing that had caused so much chaos, so much destruction, yet also had the power to change everything. A part of him wanted to throw it away, to rid himself of the burden it represented. But another part, the part that had once been filled with hope, the part that had believed the tablet could fix things, refused to let it go. "It's not just about the power," Edgen murmured. "It's about what it could do. I could fix everything I've lost. I could bring back my family, bring back those we've lost along the way." "No," Holga's voice cut through his thoughts sharply. "This isn't about what you think it could do, Edgen. It's about what it will do. You're not the first one to fall for its lies. It's too dangerous." The weight of her words hung in the air, heavier than the stone walls around them. Edgen knew she was right. The tablet had already shown its dangerous potential. He had felt it, the temptation, the lure, the way it promised things he'd never thought possible. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was the same promise that had led Safina down her dark path. It wasn't just about power. It was about control, the desire to reshape the world at any cost. "I don't want to be like her," Edgen whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. "But what if I could undo the mistakes I've made?" "You're not the only one with mistakes to fix," Doric said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "But we do it together. We don't do it by giving in to something like this." There was a long silence, and for a moment, Edgen wondered if they were all simply too broken to make the right choice. The tablet was still there, pulsing in his hands, a constant reminder of the power it offered. But they had all been touched by the same forces, shaped by the same trials. They were united in their struggle, even if they didn't fully understand what the end of their journey would look like. "I know," Edgen said softly, his voice tight. I just don't know what the right answer is anymore." Holga's hand landed on his shoulder. "None of us do. But we'll figure it out together. We've come this far. Let's not let this thing tear us apart." With a final look at the tablet, Edgen nodded. It was time to leave. The cavern had already started to feel oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in. They had to get out. They moved down the narrow corridor, the faint glow of the tablet casting strange shadows on the walls. The air grew colder as they descended deeper, and a sense of foreboding seemed to follow them. With each step, Edgen could feel the tablet's weight, both literal and metaphorical, growing heavier. It was as if the stone in his hands was becoming an anchor, pulling him towards something he couldn't yet see. But he could feel it was coming for him, for all of them. "We need a plan," Simon said, his voice breaking the silence. "We can't just keep running. We have to destroy this thing before Safina gets her hands on it again." "We don't know how," Edgen replied, his tone heavy with the burden of their situation. "We don't even know what this thing is or how to stop it." Doric, though still pale from the blast, looked resolute. "Then we find out. We get to the nearest city, get some answers. The scholars, the magic users, they might know something. But we can't stay here. This place is cursed." "Agreed," Holga said, her voice firm. "We can't let Safina get her hands on it again, and we can't keep carrying it around with us. It's too dangerous." As they rounded the corner, the faint light of an exit came into view. The outside world seemed like a distant dream, a reality they had longed for. But even as they neared freedom, Edgen couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Do you feel that?" Simon asked, his voice a whisper. Edgen nodded, his senses on high alert. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and a cold chill swept over him. They weren't alone. From the shadows of the corridor, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and exuding an air of malevolent power. Edgen's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to see the face to know who it was. "Safina, did you really think you could escape with it?" Safina's voice rang out, low and cruel. "Did you think you could defeat me with this thing?" She stepped closer, her hands crackling with dark energy. The tablet in Edgen's hands pulsed, as if it recognized its true owner. "We'll see how long you can hold on to it," Safina said with a smile, one that sent a shiver down Edgen's spine. "You've already seen what it can do, but you're not strong enough to wield it." Edgen's grip on the tablet tightened. His thoughts were clouded, his heart racing. He knew this moment was inevitable, but now that it had come, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. Safina raised her hands, and the dark energy in the air thickened. But before she could launch her attack, something unexpected happened. The tablet in Edgin's hands began to hum, its magic reacting to Safina's presence. No! Safina screamed, her hands raised in an attempt to block the power. It's mine! The magic surged again, brighter and fiercer than ever before. Edgin's body felt like it was being torn apart by the force, but he gritted his teeth and held on. The tablet's power was becoming his now. Stop! Safina shouted, her voice filled with rage. But Edgin didn't listen. The power of the tablet surged through him, stronger than anything he had ever felt. It was overwhelming, but for the first time, he was in control. He could feel Safina's magic pushing against him, but it wasn't enough. He had the power now. Enough! Edgin cried, his voice raw as he focused all of his will into the tablet. The magic erupted in a flash of light, throwing Safina back against the stone wall. The force of the explosion cracked the walls of the cavern, sending debris flying in all directions. When the dust cleared, Safina was gone. Edgin stood, panting heavily, the tablet still clutched in his hands. But the victory was hollow. He had defeated Safina for now, but the battle was far from over. The tablet's magic had given him power, but it had also shown him the cost. They had won this fight, but the war was just beginning. The dust in the cavern slowly began to settle, the echoes of the explosion fading into a tense silence. Edgin stood motionless, still clutching the tablet in his hands, the pulsing energy within it throbbing in his grip. The power was unlike anything he had ever felt before, a dangerous, intoxicating force that whispered promises in the back of his mind. His pulse raced, heart thundering in his chest, but beneath the excitement was a creeping dread. Safina was gone, for now, but the weight of the tablet still bore heavily on Edgin's shoulders. He knew that whatever happened next would shape the course of their journey. The battle with Safina had been won, but the true enemy, the power of the tablet itself, still loomed over them. Doric was the first to break the silence. She took a hesitant step toward Edgin, her eyes fixed on the tablet. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice quiet, unsure. Edgin slowly nodded, though his expression was filled with uncertainty. "I don't know. I think Safina won't be coming back for a while. But this tablet, it's something else. Something I don't understand." Halga, who had been scanning the cavern warily, turned to face Edgin. "You're right. The battle isn't over. Safina's obsession with that tablet has only just begun. And now we've seen what it can do. The question is, what do we do next?" "We leave," Simon said with finality, the words heavy with a mix of relief and dread. "We get out of here, take this thing to someone who can help. Someone who knows more than we do. We can't just hand it over to anyone," Doric said sharply. "We need to find a way to destroy it. There has to be a way to destroy it." The group stood there, the tension palpable, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. The air felt thick, as if every move they made could tip the scales. The tablet remained in Edgin's hands, almost alive, its magic stirring and pulsing, ever present. "We don't know what it can do," Edgin said slowly, turning the tablet over in his hands, as if hoping to discover some hidden clue that would make sense of its power. "We need to find answers. Find someone who can help us understand what we're dealing with. Only then can we think about destroying it." "That's a dangerous gamble," Halga warned. "You saw what happened when you held it, Edgin. And Safina, she wasn't the only one after it. There are others who will stop at nothing to get their hands on that power." Edgin looked at her, meeting her gaze, his grip tightening around the tablet. "I know, but if we don't at least try to understand it, we might all end up like Safina, lost to it." A dark silence fell over the group. The cavern's damp air seemed to cling to them, the shadows lengthening as if they, too, were waiting for an answer. After a long moment, Doric spoke again, her voice firm but filled with a quiet resolve. "We have to be careful. This isn't just some artifact, it's a force. If we take it to someone, we need to be sure they won't fall under its spell." Simon nodded in agreement. "I don't want to end up like her," he said, voice trembling slightly, the fear clear in his eyes. They all knew the stakes now. The tablet was more than just a powerful artifact. It was a force that could shape the world. And in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything they held dear. The weight of their decision was overwhelming. Edgin looked down at the tablet, his thoughts racing. He wasn't sure if he was strong enough to resist its power, but he knew that whatever happened next, they couldn't fail. Too many lives were at stake. "Let's get to the nearest city," Edgin said at last, his voice determined. "We'll find someone who knows more about this thing. And if we can't destroy it, We'll find a way to lock it away. For good. Helga gave a slow nod, though her expression remained tense. Then we move quickly. Safina won't be the last one who comes looking for it. With that, they began their trek through the twisting corridors of the ancient cavern, the exit now visible in the distance. They moved quickly, but cautiously, keeping an eye on every shadow, every sound that seemed out of place. The tablet, still pulsing with dangerous energy, was a constant reminder of what was at stake. As they emerged from the cavern, the sun had begun to set, casting an orange glow over the landscape. The horizon stretched out before them, the path to the nearest city long and fraught with peril. Edgin's mind remained focused on their next steps. The city was a distant hope, a place where answers might lie, but they were far from safe. "Do you think they'll help us?" Doric asked, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty as they began their journey. "I don't know," Edgin replied honestly. "But we have to try. If we don't, we risk everything." They traveled through the dense forest for hours, the path growing more treacherous with each step. Nightfall came quickly, and the sounds of creatures in the darkness only added to the tension. Every so often, Edgin would glance back at the tablet, which seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if it were alive, aware, and watching them. "We need to make camp," Helga said as they reached a small clearing, the dense trees offering some cover from the wind. "Tomorrow we'll make the rest of the journey." They set up camp in the clearing, the fire crackling warmly in the center. Edgin couldn't shake the feeling that the firelight was small in comparison to the power contained in the tablet. Sitting by the fire, Edgin found his thoughts drifting back to his family. He had held the tablet with the hope of bringing them back, of finding some way to undo the mistakes of his past. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the tablet's power couldn't be trusted. It promised much, but its true nature was hidden in shadows, and once you accepted its gift, it was impossible to walk away unscathed. "Do you think we'll be able to destroy it?" Simon asked, breaking Edgin's reverie. Edgin looked at him, his face solemn. "I hope so, but we need to understand what it is first." There was a long pause before Doric spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "And what if we can't destroy it?" Edgin didn't answer right away. The question hung in the air, unanswered, as if he, too, was afraid of the possibility. The truth was, he didn't know what would happen if they couldn't destroy it. But he knew they couldn't just keep carrying it around like a ticking time bomb. "Then we'll have to make sure no one else can get it," he said, his voice steady, despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. Helga gave him a sharp look. "That's not going to be easy. Whoever is after that tablet is going to be relentless." Edgin nodded, staring into the fire, watching the flames dance. He didn't have answers, and he wasn't sure if he ever would. But one thing was certain. They couldn't let this power fall into the wrong hands. As the night deepened and the fire crackled on, Edgin and the group fell into uneasy silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the danger they faced was ever present. But they had made a choice. They would see it through, no matter the cost. And somewhere, in the darkness, something was watching. The power of the tablet was never truly far away, and those who hungered for it would stop at nothing. No betrayal too vile, no sacrifice too great to seize it. Chapter 5. The City of Shadows. The first rays of dawn pierced through the trees, casting soft light over the forest as Edgin and his companions trudged onward. Their journey had been long, and though the city they sought was within reach, they knew that the true test lay ahead. The tablet, still securely held in Edgin's hands, seemed to pulse with an energy that matched the rising sun, constant, unnerving, and unstoppable. The forest had begun to thin as they neared the outskirts of the city, a sprawling collection of stone buildings and towering spires rising up before them. The city was ancient, its walls covered with ivy and moss, yet it exuded a sense of quiet power. It had been a long time since they had ventured into a place like this, an urban environment, full of potential allies, but also hidden dangers. "I don't like this place," Helga muttered under her breath as they neared the city gates. Her hand rested on the hilt of her axe, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a wariness that mirrored Edgin's own. They were being watched, he could feel it. The tablet's presence was a constant reminder of the danger that still lingered, and though they had escaped Safina's grasp for the moment, they knew that others would be seeking them soon. Doric walked at Edgin's side, her face pensive. "We need to be careful," she said quietly. "This city may hold the answers we need, but it also holds many who would do anything to take the tablet from us." Simon, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. We've survived worse, right? This is just another challenge. We'll find someone here who can help us. Edgen wasn't so sure. The weight of the tablet in his hands felt heavier with each passing step. The closer they got to the city, the more the air seemed to thrum with unspoken danger. The tablet was too powerful to be ignored, and Edgen knew that the further they traveled, the more likely they were to encounter someone who would stop at nothing to take it from them. The gates loomed ahead, guarded by two heavily armored sentries who watched the group with narrowed eyes. The guards didn't make a move as they approached, but Edgen could tell that they were sizing them up, trying to determine whether they were a threat. As they reached the gates, one of the guards stepped forward, his voice gruff. "What business do you have in our city?" he asked, his tone less than welcoming. "We seek counsel," Edgen replied, keeping his voice calm. "We've come across an artifact, and we need to find someone who can help us understand its power." The guard's eyes flickered to the tablet in Edgen's hands, his expression unreadable. He studied the group for a moment, and for a moment, Edgen felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. Finally, the guard nodded. "Enter, but stay on the main roads," he said. "There are those here who wouldn't hesitate to make trouble for outsiders. Keep to yourselves." They entered the city cautiously, their eyes darting from side to side as they moved through the crowded streets. The city was alive, bustling with merchants peddling their wares, travelers from distant lands, and city folk going about their daily lives. Yet there was an underlying tension in the air, something Edgen couldn't quite place. People watched them as they passed, their gazes lingering for too long, as if they were waiting for something. Waiting for a sign, a signal that something was about to happen. They made their way to the center of the city, where the grand temple stood. It was an imposing structure, its massive stone pillars towering over the surrounding buildings. Inside, the temple was quiet and serene, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the streets outside. There, they hoped to find someone who could help them understand the tablet and perhaps guide them on the next step of their journey. As they entered the temple, they were greeted by an elderly monk who had been meditating at the center of the room. He rose slowly, his eyes sharp and knowing as he looked at Edgen and the group. "What brings you here?" the monk asked in a soft voice, his gaze lingering on the tablet that Edgen still held. "You carry something of great power." "We need your help," Edgen said, stepping forward. "We've found this artifact, and we don't know what it is, but we know it's dangerous. We need someone who understands its magic." The monk's eyes flickered with recognition, and for a moment, there was a long silence. Then slowly he nodded. "You seek the elders. They are the ones who can help you with this." "The elders?" Doric asked, her brow furrowed. "Where can we find them?" "Follow the path through the temple," the monk said, gesturing to a set of stairs that led down into the earth. "The elders reside below, where the old records are kept." Without another word, the group followed the monk's directions, descending into the depths of the temple. The air grew colder as they walked deeper, the walls lined with ancient tapestries and intricate carvings that told stories of forgotten times. At the end of the hallway, they found a large door, heavy and ornate, with runes carved into its surface. The monk placed his hand on the door, and with a soft murmur, the door creaked open. The room beyond was vast, its walls lined with shelves filled with scrolls, books, and artifacts of unimaginable age. At the center of the room sat three figures, elders dressed in flowing robes, their faces hidden behind masks of silver and gold. "You have come," one of the elders said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We have been waiting for you." Edgen stepped forward, his heart racing. "We need your help. We've found an artifact, a tablet, and we don't understand its power. We need to know what it is, and how we can destroy it before it destroys us." The elders remained silent for a long moment, their eyes shifting to the tablet that Edgen held. It was as if they were weighing the cost of what he had asked. Finally, one of the elders spoke again. "This tablet," the elder began, his voice grave, "is not just any artifact. It is an ancient object of immense power, tied to the very fabric of the world itself. It was created long ago, during a time of great strife, by those who sought to control the forces of magic. Its true name is the Obsidian Tablet, and it is said to hold the power to reshape reality itself." Edgen's grip on the tablet tightened. "Reshape reality?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," the elder confirmed. "But with such power comes great cost. The tablet has a mind of its own. It will offer you what you desire most, but it will not do so without taking something in return. Those who seek to wield its power often find themselves lost to its influence, consumed by their own desires. Then how do we stop it? Holga asked, her voice hard with determination. The tablet cannot be destroyed easily, the elder said. To destroy it would require more than mere strength. It would require a sacrifice, one that many are unwilling to make. But there is a way to lock its power away, to bind it so that no one can ever use it again. It requires the combined efforts of those who are pure of heart and strong in will. Edgen felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly followed by a cold fear. What is the price of this binding? He asked, knowing the answer might be worse than the tablet itself. The elder's gaze turned somber. The price is your very soul. One who seeks to lock the tablet's power away must be willing to give up their most precious memories, their greatest desires, and their very identity. The magic of the tablet is not easily bound. To lock it away, the one who performs the ritual must surrender all that they are. Edgen stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The tablet in his hands pulsed with a strange intensity, as if it knew what was coming. He had thought about the possibility of destroying it, but this was something different. To save the world, he would have to give up everything he had fought for. I'll do it, Edgen said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He had already lost so much. What was one more sacrifice, if it meant saving the world from the destruction the tablet could cause? But as the words left his mouth, the ground beneath them trembled, and the voice of Safina echoed through the chamber. You think you can stop me? She hissed, her form appearing before them, wreathed in dark energy. You're too late, Edgen. I've already claimed what is mine. And just like that, their world tilted again. As Safina's voice reverberated through the stone walls of the chamber, the air grew thick with tension. The elders, who had been calm moments before, now stood rigid, their eyes fixed on the apparition that had appeared before them. Edgen's heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the unmistakable presence of the tablet grow stronger, almost as though it recognized its new adversary. Safina, bathed in shadows and crackling with dark energy, stood before them, her eyes burning with malice. She was no longer the woman they had first encountered. The tablet's power had twisted her, consumed her, and now she was a vessel of its darkest desires. You really thought you could keep it from me? Safina sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. Foolish mortals, you've played right into my hands. The elders, undeterred by her presence, raised their hands in unison, their fingers tracing ancient symbols in the air. Their movements were deliberate, slow, and steady, as if they had faced this kind of dark magic before. Edgen felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly dashed by Safina's chilling laugh. You cannot stop me, elders, Safina said with a cruel smile. You have no power over me now. With a flick of her wrist, the chamber's once stable walls shook violently, and a pulse of dark energy shot through the temple. The elders faltered, but they quickly regained their composure, their eyes locking onto Safina's with a mixture of resolve and regret. Do not underestimate us, one of the elders said, his voice steady despite the chaos that enveloped them. We have seen your kind before. You will not be the one to wield the tablet's power. Safina's eyes flared with fury. I already wield it, she spat, and with another wave of her hand, a surge of dark magic cascaded toward the group, sending them scrambling for cover. Edgen barely had time to react as the blast of energy struck the ground where he had been standing. The force of it knocked him to the floor, the tablet slipping from his grasp and skittering across the stone tiles. His vision blurred, and for a moment he felt his limbs go numb. His body ached, the strain of the battle and the overwhelming power of the tablet taking its toll on him. Edgen! Doric shouted, rushing to his side. Holga, equally fast on her feet, quickly moved to protect the elders, her axe raised as she scanned the room for any immediate threats. The entire temple seemed to tremble with the force of Safina's wrath. But the woman, now consumed by dark power, did not pause. She reached out and grasped the tablet from the ground, her fingers closing around it with a manic gleam in her eyes. I will not be denied, Safina whispered, almost to herself. Her voice seemed to resonate with a cold, unnatural resonance. She raised the tablet high above her head, her arms shaking with the intensity of the power she was channeling through it. The elders stepped forward, murmuring an incantation in a language that sounded ancient and unfamiliar. The air around them began to vibrate, the power of their combined magic pushing against Safina's. But Safina only smiled. You think your petty spells will stop me? She mocked, her voice full of derision. I've seen the depths of the tablet's magic, and I have become one with it. No spell, no ritual can contain me now. The light in the room flickered, and for a brief moment, the elder's magic faltered. Safina's grip on the tablet tightened, her eyes glowing with dark power. The room was filled with a bone-chilling silence as the group watched, helpless, unable to intervene. Then suddenly, there was a surge, a blinding flash of white light, and the tablet was ripped from Safina's hands, floating midair as if suspended by an unseen force. Safina screamed in rage, her hands reaching out, desperate to reclaim what she had lost. "No," she cried out. "It's mine! It's mine!" Edgin, struggling to regain his footing, watched in awe as the elders took control of the tablet's power. The ancient runes on the stone walls of the chamber began to glow, illuminating the room in a soft, otherworldly light. The elders were no longer simply guiding the tablet. They were in sync with it, their combined magic turning the tide of the battle. "You are consumed by your own desires," one of the elders said, his voice unwavering. "You cannot control what was never meant to be controlled." With a final, forceful gesture, the elders sent a wave of magic crashing towards Safina. The dark energy around her recoiled, as if it had met an immovable object. Safina staggered backward, her body convulsing, as if the very magic she had embraced was rejecting her. "No!" Safina gasped. "No! This cannot be." But before she could finish her sentence, the elder's magic bound her in place, her body frozen in midair as the power of the tablet surged through her. The room filled with a blinding light, and for a moment, Edgin thought he might lose consciousness. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded, and the temple grew still. Safina was gone. The tablet was now in the hands of the elders, who had managed to reclaim it from the darkness that had consumed her. Edgin, still breathless, looked up, his eyes meeting the elder's solemn gaze. What happened to her? The elder gave a slow, almost mournful shake of his head. The tablet was never meant to be used for such selfish purposes. Safina's ambition blinded her, and now she has paid the price. She is lost to its power. Edgin felt a deep pang of sorrow for Safina. She had once been a person, a woman with desires and goals, but the tablet had twisted her, corrupted her to the point where she could no longer see the consequences of her actions. She had wanted to change the world, but in the end, it was the tablet that had changed her. "We must make sure it never happens again," Edgin said, his voice firm. The elder nodded gravely. "You are right. The tablet must be locked away, far from those who would seek to use it for their own gain. It is too dangerous." Doric stepped forward, her face filled with concern. "And what about us? We were here to stop Safina, but now what?" The elder turned to face them. "You have done more than you realize. You have stopped a great evil from being unleashed upon the world. The tablet's power is now contained. But the burden is not yours to bear. You have already sacrificed much. Leave this place, and know that the tablet will no longer haunt you." Edgin felt a mix of relief and sorrow wash over him. They had won, but the victory came with a price. Safina was lost, and the tablet was still an object of immense power. Its magic was locked away for now, but Edgin couldn't shake the feeling that its story was far from over. "We'll leave," Edgin said quietly, "but we'll never forget what happened here. We've seen the cost of power, and we know that it's not something to be taken lightly." The elder gave a single nod. "Then go in peace. And remember, the power of the tablet is not the only thing that can shape the world. Your choices, your actions will shape the future." With those final words, Edgin and his companions turned and left the temple, the heavy weight of the tablet's legacy still pressing on them. The sun had set, and the city now lay in darkness, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Edgin felt a glimmer of hope. They had stopped Safina. They had contained the tablet. But the path ahead was still uncertain. And as they left the city behind, Edgin couldn't help but wonder. How long would it be before someone else tried to claim the power of the obsidian tablet? How long before the darkness returned? Chapter 6: The Echoes of Power. The City of Shadows, once alive with the faint hum of secrets and untold stories, now stood still in the wake of Safina's defeat. The elder's magic had banished the darkness she embodied, but Edgin and his companions felt no sense of triumph. Instead, there was a heavy silence that seemed to blanket the world around them. They had achieved a victory, yes, but it was a hollow one. Safina's ambition had led her down a dangerous path, and though she was gone, the consequences of her actions remained etched into the world like a scar that refused to heal. The group walked out of the temple in silence, their minds heavy with thoughts of what had just transpired. The streets of the city, once bustling with life, now felt oppressive, as if every stone and every shadow held some lingering echo of the power that had been unleashed here. Edgen couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered, that the battle they had fought was not the last one they would face. They passed through the city's gates, the weight of the tablet's power still a palpable presence between them. The elders had assured them that the tablet was now locked away, its magic contained, but Edgen couldn't help but doubt. Magic like that, raw, untamed, and limitless, could never truly be controlled. It had taken Safina, and who was to say that it wouldn't claim someone else next? Holga's voice broke through the silence, gruff and resolute as always. So what now? We've stopped Safina, locked the tablet away. What do we do next? Edgen turned to her, his brow furrowed. I don't know. I thought we'd have answers by now, but all we have is uncertainty. The tablet is still out there, its power still a threat. We need to be sure that it never falls into the wrong hands again. Doric, who had been quiet for most of their journey, spoke up. What if the real danger isn't the tablet itself? What if the danger is us? What if we've only just begun to understand the cost of what we've done? Her words hung in the air like a dark omen. They were all thinking the same thing. The tablet had changed Safina, twisted her into something unrecognizable, and in doing so, it had changed them too. Edgen had seen his own ambitions, his desires, reflected in her madness. He had sought to use the tablet for good, to right the wrongs of his past, but how far would he be willing to go? How much would he sacrifice to wield that kind of power? The question lingered, unanswered, as they left the city behind them. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but one thing was clear. Their journey wasn't over. Not yet. They walked for days, the weight of their victory, and their lingering doubts, pulling them down like a stone. With Safina gone, the immediate threat had been quelled, but the world had a way of throwing new challenges their way when they least expected it. The tablet was locked away, but Edgen knew that someone, someday, would come looking for it. And when they did, the world would be thrown back into the chaos that had almost consumed it before. As they made camp one night, Edgen sat apart from the group, staring into the flickering flames. His thoughts were a maelstrom, torn between the hope that they had done the right thing and the gnawing fear that they hadn't. Holga's voice brought him back to reality. "You've been quiet," she said, lowering herself onto a nearby log and handing him a mug of ale. "What's on your mind?" Edgen took the drink, grateful for the distraction, but his thoughts quickly returned to the same place. "I'm not sure we've done enough. We stopped Safina, yes, but I can't help but wonder if we've just delayed the inevitable." "Delayed the inevitable?" Holga's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The tablet," Edgen said, his voice heavy. "It's too powerful, too dangerous. We locked it away, but it's still out there. Someone will come for it, someone who thinks they can control it. And when that happens, it will all happen again." Holga was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "You're not wrong. But what's your plan? You want to go back and destroy it? The elders already told you it can't be destroyed." "I know," Edgen replied, his gaze turning back to the fire. "But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something. We've seen what the tablet can do, what it can turn a person into. And I'm afraid that if we leave it where it is, someone like Safina, will find it and be consumed by it. What if the real answer isn't about controlling it, but about ensuring it never has the chance to do that again?" Holga didn't respond right away, but Edgen could see that she was thinking it over. "I get it," she said at last. "You think it needs to be destroyed once and for all. But that's not going to be easy. We'd need more than just magic to do it. We'd need allies. We'd need something stronger than willpower alone." "I know," Edgen said quietly, feeling a deep sense of weariness settle over him. "But I don't think we can leave it to chance. We can't take the risk that someone else will come along and unleash the same chaos we've just barely stopped." Doric, who had been listening from the shadows of their camp, finally spoke up. "And what do you propose we do? We can't just go marching back to the city and demand the tablet's destruction. The elders aren't likely to let us do that. They've already locked it away. The power of the tablet is theirs now." Edgen's eyes met hers, and he could see the resolve in her gaze. She understood the stakes better than anyone, but they all knew how dangerous the tablet was. It wasn't just a threat, it was a ticking bomb, and the longer it stayed hidden, the longer someone might find a way to unlock its power. "I'm not sure yet," Edgen said, his voice low. "But we need to find a way to stop the cycle from repeating. The tablet can't be allowed to fall into the wrong hands again, and I'm not going to wait until it's too late." The group fell into a thoughtful silence as the fire crackled in the night air. They knew Edgen was right. The tablet had to be dealt with, one way or another. But the question of how was far from simple. The elders had locked it away, but they couldn't be trusted to keep it safe forever. And even if they did, there was always the possibility that someone else, someone with enough power, would seek it out, desperate to control it. The weight of that realization settled over them all like a shroud. They were caught in a game much larger than any of them had anticipated, and they would have to be more than just adventurers if they were to ensure that the power of the tablet would never be unleashed again. "We'll figure it out," Edgen said, determination creeping into his voice. "But for now, we rest. Tomorrow, we head for the mountains." Holga raised her mug, nodding in agreement. "Tomorrow, then." But as they sat in the fading glow of the fire, each of them wondering what the future held, they knew that their journey was far from over. The true cost of the tablet's power, what it meant for the world, had yet to be fully realized, and the choices they would make in the coming days would shape the fate of everyone. The morning after their solemn night around the campfire, the weight of their decision lingered in the air like a thick fog. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a faint golden light over the barren landscape before them. The mountains loomed in the distance, jagged peaks piercing the sky. The group had no clear path forward, but their only choice was to continue. Edgen led the way, his steps purposeful despite the uncertainty gnawing at his mind. Behind him, Holga, Doric, and the rest followed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The sound of their footsteps on the dirt path was the only noise that broke the stillness of the morning, their presence in the wilderness a stark contrast to the chaos and shadows they had left behind in the city. Edgen couldn't help but think about Safina. Her transformation, her descent into madness, was a haunting reminder of what the tablet could do to a person. The desire for control, for power, had driven her to the brink of destruction. And yet, despite her fate, Edgen still couldn't escape the feeling that the tablet had a greater pull than he could comprehend. He wondered if, deep down, they had made the right choice in leaving it locked away. Had they done enough to ensure that it would never fall into the wrong hands again? Or had they merely delayed the inevitable? Holga's voice broke through his thoughts. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Edgen glanced over at her, surprised by the insight in her words. She had always been straightforward, a woman of action rather than reflection, but she understood him better than most. He didn't know whether to be grateful for her understanding or frustrated by it. "It's hard not to," he admitted, his voice heavy. "We've sealed the tablet away for now, but that doesn't mean it's truly safe. We don't know who else might come looking for it, or what they'll do once they find it." Holga raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you plan to do about it?" "I don't know," Edgen said, his frustration evident. "I keep thinking about Safina, about how she was consumed by it. We can't let that happen again. But I'm not sure how we can stop it. The elders seem convinced that locking it away is enough, but how do we know they won't be tempted? Power like that doesn't just disappear." Doric, who had been walking quietly alongside them, spoke up. "It's not just the tablet we need to worry about. It's what people will do for it. Safina wasn't the only one who would have wanted it. The temptation of that kind of power is something everyone will face eventually." Edgen stopped in his tracks, looking at her with a new understanding. "So, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that the problem isn't just about controlling the tablet," Doric said, her voice steady. "It's about stopping others from even having the chance to use it. If we go back to the city and tell the elders to keep it locked away, they might. But sooner or later, someone else will come for it, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. We need to make sure no one can ever find it again." A heavy silence hung over them as the implications of Doric's words sank in. Edgen thought about the elders, their ancient knowledge, their power, and the sacrifices they had made to protect the world. But even with their wisdom, the temptation of the tablet was too great. They could try to lock it away forever, but sooner or later, someone would find a way to unlock its power. "We can't let that happen," Edgen said, his voice firm. "We'll have to take it somewhere no one can ever reach it. We need to destroy it, once and for all." Holga nodded. "That's what I've been saying. We can't just sit around waiting for someone to come looking for it. We have to make sure it's gone for good." The group's resolve solidified in that moment. They knew what had to be done. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was the only path that made sense. They couldn't take the risk that the tablet might one day be used again, no matter who sought it. As they continued their trek toward the mountains, the group began to formulate a plan. The first step would be finding a way to destroy the tablet, but that was easier said than done. The magic within it was ancient, woven into the very fabric of reality itself. They couldn't just throw it into a fire or shatter it with a hammer. They would need something more, something powerful enough to break the tablet's hold on the world. They spent the next several days in quiet deliberation, traveling through rugged terrain and passing through small villages, trying to gather information and resources. They spoke to mystics, sages, and even blacksmiths, but no one seemed to have the knowledge they needed. Destruction of something as potent as the obsidian tablet was not something anyone took lightly. It was during one of their rest stops, at a small inn nestled in the valley of the mountains, that they met an old woman who claimed to know of a way. Her name was Elira, and her eyes gleamed with a knowledge that Edgin could not place. She was a recluse, living on the edge of the known world, and her reputation preceded her. Some said she was a former elder, others whispered that she was a sorceress who had turned her back on the world of magic. But whatever the truth of her past, she seemed to hold the key to what they sought. "You're looking for a way to destroy the tablet, aren't you?" Elira asked, as if she had known they would come to her all along. Edgin nodded, not bothering to hide the urgency in his voice. "Yes, we need to find a way to destroy it, before it can be used again." Elira studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his soul. "You understand what you ask, don't you? Destroying the tablet is not like shattering a weapon or burning a book. The magic that binds it is old, older than even the elders. To break it would require a sacrifice, a deep one. And even then, the world might never be the same." Doric stepped forward, her brow furrowed in concern. "We don't care about the cost. We've seen the damage it can do. It needs to be destroyed." Elira nodded slowly, her eyes softening with a mixture of sympathy and regret. "Very well. But know this, there are no easy answers when it comes to magic like this. If you truly wish to destroy the tablet, you must travel to the heart of the mountains, to the Temple of the Eternal Flame. There, you will find what you need to break the tablet's hold." Edgin's heart raced as the woman spoke. The Temple of the Eternal Flame. He had heard of it before, but it was said to be a place of myth, a forgotten relic of an age-long past. No one who had ventured into the mountains to find it had ever returned. "We'll do it," Edgin said, determination hardening his voice. "We'll find this temple and destroy the tablet." Elira gave him a long, lingering look, as if she were measuring the depths of his resolve. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke again. "Beware. The path you seek will not be easy. You will face trials, and not all of you will make it through. The tablet's magic is woven into the very fabric of reality. If you disturb it, there will be consequences. But if you are truly committed to this, then go, and may whatever gods you believe in watch over you." With that, Elira disappeared into the shadows of the inn, leaving Edgin and his companions to prepare for the journey ahead. The next day, they set out once more, their hearts heavy with the weight of their decision. They had no choice but to follow Elira's advice, to find the Temple of the Eternal Flame and destroy the tablet once and for all. But as they traveled deeper into the mountains, the shadows of doubt began to close in around them once again. What would they find at the heart of the mountains? And what price would they have to pay to rid the world of the tablet's cursed power? Chapter 7. The Path of Trials. The mountains loomed large, their jagged peaks cutting through the sky like the teeth of some ancient beast. The path to the Temple of the Eternal Flame was not one easily taken. For days, the party pressed on, the ground beneath them rough and uneven, as if the mountains themselves were unwilling to give up their secrets. The air grew thinner with every step they took, and the further they ventured, the more the world seemed to close in around them. The sounds of the forest and the villages below were left behind, replaced by the relentless wind and the distant call of mountain birds. It was a harsh and unforgiving landscape, one that offered no mercy to the unprepared. Edgin, leading the group, found himself growing more and more uncertain with each passing hour. The road ahead felt endless, and despite the determination that fueled them, the sense of dread never fully left him. The weight of their mission pressed down on him, each step carrying with it the responsibility of the decision they had made. They had come so far already. There was no turning back now. Helga walked beside him, her pace steady and unyielding. She had always been the rock of their group, the one who didn't flinch in the face of danger. But even she seemed to sense the gravity of the task ahead. "We'll make it," Helga said, glancing over at Edgin, her voice as firm as ever. "We've come this far. No sense in stopping now." "I know," Edgin replied, trying to shake the unease that had taken root in his chest. It's just, everything feels wrong. We've been through battles, through magic and monsters, but this feels different. Like we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the world, Holga said, her words carrying a weight that mirrored his own. And that means doing whatever it takes. We don't have a choice. If we don't stop the tablet, then everything we've done, everything Safina did, it'll all be for nothing. Edgin nodded, taking in her words. She was right. The tablet couldn't be allowed to remain hidden forever. Its power was too great, its influence too insidious. They couldn't risk waiting until someone else found it and unleashed its chaos once again. Behind them, Doric was quiet, her expression unreadable. The sorcerer had been a valuable ally since the beginning, but Edgin knew there was something that weighed on her, something more than just the physical toll of their journey. He glanced back at her and saw her gaze fixed on the path ahead, her eyes distant. "Doric," he said, his voice soft. She didn't turn to look at him right away, but after a moment, she responded. "What is it?" "You've been distant," Edgin said carefully, aware that Doric didn't always open up easily. "What's going on in your head?" Doric's lips pressed into a thin line, and she sighed deeply, almost as though the weight of their quest had become too much for her. "I'm wondering if we're doing the right thing." Edgin furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" "The tablet," Doric said, her voice low. "I know what we've seen, and I know the destruction it's capable of. But I can't shake the feeling that we're not fully understanding what it is. What it represents. Magic like that, it has consequences, Edgin. Not just for us, but for the world. The balance is fragile. We're about to tip it, and we may never be able to put it back." Edgin's thoughts raced. He had considered the idea of balance, of the delicate equilibrium between power and responsibility, but he had never put it into words the way Doric had. What if the tablet wasn't just a tool of destruction? What if its magic was integral to something far larger, something that, once broken, could never be repaired? Holga grunted, hearing the conversation from behind. "You're all acting like this is some grand philosophical debate. We don't have time for it. The tablet needs to go. Whatever it takes." But even Holga's blunt approach couldn't quell the seeds of doubt that were beginning to sprout in Edgin's mind. They had come this far, and now the path to the temple seemed to stretch endlessly before them, full of unknown dangers. It was no longer just about the tablet. It was about what would happen after they destroyed it, and whether they were truly prepared for the consequences. The next few days passed in a blur. The higher they climbed, the colder it became. The thin air made their breaths ragged, and their movements slower. The ground was uneven, filled with sharp rocks and sudden drops. The path narrowed in places, forcing them to scale narrow ledges or crawl through tight caves. The mountains seemed to test their resolve at every turn, as though it were an ancient force, warning them of the price they might pay for what they sought to do. As they approached the temple, the landscape began to change. The rocky outcroppings grew sparse, replaced by a dense mist that clung to the air. Edgin could barely see a few feet in front of him as the fog thickened, enveloping them in a chilling silence. The air felt heavy with magic, as if the very earth around them was charged with an energy they couldn't comprehend. It was then that they heard it. A low, guttural growl, distant at first, but growing louder with each passing second. Edgin's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, and the group stopped dead in their tracks. "Something's not right," Doric whispered, her eyes scanning the fog for any sign of movement. The growl grew louder, closer. And then, through the mist, they saw the shape emerge. A massive creature, its body covered in scales that shimmered like obsidian, stood before them. It had the form of a bear, but its eyes were not of this world. They glowed with an unnatural fire, and its growls reverberated through the ground beneath their feet. "By the gods," Holga muttered under her breath, drawing her axe. "What the hell is that thing?" Edgin's hand tightened around his sword. "It's guarding the temple. The temple of the eternal flame," Doric said softly. "It's not just a place. It's a test. The tablet's magic is alive here. We're going to have to fight for our right to destroy it." The creature took a step forward, its claws scraping against the stone beneath it. Edgin had no doubt that if they didn't defeat it, they wouldn't make it to the temple. The creature was a guardian, a manifestation of the very magic they sought to break. Without another word, they charged. Holga was the first to engage, rushing forward with her axe raised high. The beast roared and swung its massive claws, narrowly missing her. Edgin followed close behind, his sword flashing in the dim light as he slashed at the creature's hide. The scales were thick and tough, but there were weak points where his blade found purchase. Doric began to chant, her hands weaving through the air as she summoned fire and magic to aid them. Bolts of lightning crackled through the air, striking the beast in bursts, but it barely seemed to flinch. The creature was strong, stronger than anything they had faced before. For what felt like an eternity, the battle raged. Halga and Edgen fought with everything they had, dodging the beast's massive paws and slashing at its scales. Doric's magic crackled in the air, but even her most powerful spells seemed to have little effect on the creature. It wasn't until Doric shouted a command, an incantation that resonated with the very core of the magic surrounding them, that the creature paused. Its eyes flickered, as if confused for a moment, and then it let out a roar of agony, its form twisting in the air. "Now!" Doric cried. With one final, combined effort, they struck. Halga's axe found its mark in the beast's throat, and Edgen's sword pierced deep into its side. The creature let out a final roar and collapsed, its body disintegrating into the mist like smoke, leaving only a faint trace of the power that had sustained it. The group stood in the silence that followed, their chests heaving with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. They had passed the first trial, but they knew that many more awaited them. The Temple of the Eternal Flame stood ahead, its entrance now visible through the dissipating mist. The final test awaited. Entrance to the Temple of the Eternal Flame. The stone structure seemed ancient, its architecture worn by time but still imposing. Pillars lined the entrance, covered in cryptic runes and symbols Edgen couldn't even begin to decipher. The air felt thicker here, almost charged with a latent magic, and the faint scent of sulfur tinged the atmosphere. This place had seen untold generations pass through it, and yet the presence of the tablet, or whatever lay within, kept it alive, an enigma wrapped in centuries of secrets. Edgen wiped the sweat from his brow, still catching his breath from the fierce battle they had just fought. His muscles ached from the strain, but there was no time to rest. They had come this far, and the temple would not give up its answers easily. Halga, still gripping her blood-stained axe, scanned the entrance warily. "This is it, then," she said, her voice steady but laced with a tension that matched Edgen's. "We've made it to the final trial." Doric, her face pale but determined, nodded. "We've passed the creature guarding the path. But don't let your guard down yet. This temple has more trials in store for us." Edgen turned to face his companions, his heart pounding in his chest. "We can do this. Whatever comes, we've faced worse. But we need to be careful. We don't know what's inside." With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the others following closely behind him. As they approached the stone entrance, a low hum filled the air, resonating from deep within the temple. The sound was both soothing and unsettling, as if the walls themselves were alive, watching them, waiting for them to take the next step. The doors to the temple, massive slabs of stone adorned with ancient inscriptions, slowly creaked open before them, almost as though they had been waiting for the group's arrival. They stepped into the darkened interior, the shadows stretching long across the grand hall that lay before them. The only light came from the flickering flames embedded in the walls, torches that had burned for centuries, their flames untouched by time. The temperature dropped instantly. The warmth of the sun outside seemed a distant memory as the group moved deeper into the temple. Their steps echoed through the hollow stone chamber, the sound magnified by the vast emptiness. It felt like they were walking through a tomb, a forgotten world filled with untold power and danger. As they moved forward, the entrance sealed itself behind them with a heavy thud, leaving them trapped inside. Edgen's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword as they paused, taking in their surroundings. The temple hall was lined with statues, tall, stone figures carved with intricate details. Some depicted warriors, others gods, but all seemed to share one thing in common: their eyes. Each statue's eyes glowed faintly with an eerie light, and as Edgen passed one, it almost seemed to follow his every movement. "Not a fan of the atmosphere," Halga muttered, her gaze flitting from statue to statue. "We need to focus," Edgen said, his voice low. "We've come this far. Stay alert." Ahead of them, the path split into 3 directions, each corridor leading further into the temple's heart. There was no indication of which path would lead them to the heart of the temple where the tablet was kept, but Doric stepped forward, her eyes scanning the symbols carved into the walls. "Looks like we have a choice," she said, pointing to the engravings. "These symbols, they represent different trials. The paths aren't just random, they're connected to tests we'll have to face." Edgen's gaze followed her finger, narrowing in on the symbols. There was one for strength, one for wisdom, and one for sacrifice. He understood immediately. The temple would test them, not just physically, but in ways that would challenge their very spirits. Well, this is great, Helga said dryly. Strength, wisdom, and sacrifice. I'm guessing we don't get to pick. Doric nodded, her voice tight with the weight of what was to come. We'll have to face all three. The temple will decide the order. All we can do is be ready. With that, the group made their way down the path marked with the symbol for strength. The air grew heavier as they walked, the ground beneath them shifting. The walls seemed to close in as they descended further into the heart of the temple, until they found themselves standing before a large stone door. This is it, Edgen said, taking a deep breath. Whatever's on the other side, we face it together. Helga nodded, her grip tightening on her axe. I'm ready. Doric stepped forward and placed her hand on the door, her fingers brushing against the cold stone. As she did, a low rumble reverberated through the ground beneath their feet. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a massive chamber beyond, the ceiling disappearing into shadows above. Inside, the chamber was filled with traps, spiked pits, swinging blades, and pressure plates embedded into the floor. At the center of the room stood a massive statue, its arms raised high, as if beckoning them forward. The symbol of strength was etched into the statue's chest, and at its feet, a pedestal held what looked like a large, heavy stone orb. All right, looks like we need to move fast, Edgen said, his voice low. Don't touch the traps. Doric raised her hands, and with a quiet chant, she sent out a pulse of magic, illuminating the traps and revealing their patterns. I can see them, she said, but we'll need to move quickly. The traps are connected to the pedestal. If we're not careful, activating it could trigger a whole cascade of them. Helga grinned. Sounds like my kind of challenge. Without waiting for a response, she charged forward, her powerful legs propelling her across the room. As she sprinted, the traps began to activate, blades swinging down and spikes rising from the floor. But Helga was quick, her agility defying her size as she dodged each deadly obstacle with ease, her movements fluid and controlled. Edgen and Doric followed closely behind, navigating the traps with less speed but equal caution. They didn't need to rush, they just needed to keep moving, stay alert, and avoid triggering the deadly mechanisms that surrounded them. They reached the pedestal at the center of the room, and Edgen stood before the stone orb, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The orb was impossibly heavy, its surface smooth and cold to the touch. It radiated a strange energy, as though it were alive with magic. The pedestal's the key, Edgen said. We need to lift the orb. Helga stepped forward, placing her hands on the orb. Her muscles strained, but the orb didn't budge. It's heavier than it looks. We're not just supposed to lift it, Doric said, her eyes narrowing. We have to do it together. It's a test of our combined strength. Edgen nodded, moving forward to join Helga. Together, they placed their hands on the orb, and with a concerted effort, they lifted it from the pedestal. The moment the orb left its resting place, the ground shook violently. The walls of the chamber groaned, and the traps that had once been inactive now snapped into place, springing into motion with deadly speed. Run! Edgen shouted. Without hesitation, the group turned and sprinted toward the door. The chamber erupted into chaos behind them, blades swinging, spikes thrusting from the ground, and the sound of stone grinding against stone. They barely managed to make it through the doorway as the traps behind them began to collapse into the ground. The door slammed shut, and for a moment, the group stood in stunned silence. They had made it through the first trial. Edgen exhaled sharply, wiping the sweat from his brow. That was too close. Helga gave a low laugh. Too close? I thought it was fun. We're not done yet, Doric said, her voice strained. The next trial awaits. The trials are connected. Each test will be harder than the last. Edgen turned to look at his companions, his resolve hardening once more. We've come this far. We can't stop now. The next path lay before them, marked with the symbol of wisdom. Chapter 8. The Trial of Wisdom. The path ahead was more daunting than any they had yet faced. The temple's stone walls, once only silent observers of the party's journey, seemed to pulse with a strange energy, their cold surfaces seeming to breathe in the thick, heavy air. The further they ventured into the depths, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very space they moved through was a living thing. Time itself seemed to stretch and bend in this strange place, where shadows played tricks on the eyes and sounds became distorted, echoing endlessly through the chamber's vast, hollow spaces. Edgen, his steps hesitant yet determined, led the way down the path marked with the symbol of wisdom. The air had grown thick with a sense of something ancient and ancient knowledge, like the weight of centuries rested on his shoulders. The walls around them were adorned with carvings, deeply etched lines that twisted and turned, illustrating stories that Edgen didn't recognize but knew held the key to something far beyond their understanding. The magic in this place was ancient, older than anything they had encountered, and its pull was undeniable. "We're getting close," Edgen murmured to the others, his voice low as if the very air around them could hear. Holga was right behind him, her eyes scanning the labyrinthine halls as if expecting an ambush at any moment. "Close to what? More traps? I'm ready for whatever comes." Doric remained quiet, her eyes flitting back and forth as she examined the runes that adorned the walls. She had been strangely quiet ever since they had passed the trial of strength, her usual confidence tempered with a sense of foreboding. The sorceress had always been more attuned to magic than the others, and something about this place seemed to unsettle her. "What are you thinking, Doric?" Edgen asked, sensing her unease. The elf turned to him, her gaze distant. "These carvings, they tell a story of a great calamity, of a civilization long forgotten that sought to harness the power of the tablet. The stories they tried to record here, they're not just warnings. They're lessons. Wisdom, Edgen, is not simply knowing the right path. It's knowing what price you'll pay for the knowledge." Edgen swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. They had all known the risks when they had set out on this journey, but something in Doric's voice now made him doubt if they truly understood what they were about to face. He had always relied on his instincts, on the hope that their cause was just. But in this place, with the air so thick with ancient power, doubt began to creep into his heart. "Maybe we should turn back," he said, though his voice lacked the conviction he wished it had. Holga, ever the pragmatist, slapped him on the back with a force that almost knocked the air from his lungs. "And go where? We're here, and we're not leaving without that tablet. We've faced worse than this, Edgen. Don't lose your nerve now." Edgen nodded, pushing his doubts to the back of his mind. Holga was right. They had come too far to stop now, no matter the danger or uncertainty that lay ahead. "Then let's keep moving," he said, his voice firm once again. The air around them began to grow colder as they continued down the path, and the flickering torches embedded in the walls cast eerie, dancing shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. It wasn't long before they reached another door, this one large and imposing, unlike any they had encountered thus far. It was adorned with intricate engravings, each line glowing faintly with an ethereal blue light. The door seemed to hum with magic, an almost palpable force emanating from it. Edgen stepped forward, reaching for the door. Before he could touch it, however, Doric raised her hand, stopping him. "Wait," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can feel the magic here. It's not like the others. This is different." "What do you mean?" Holga asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "It's a test of the mind, not the body," Doric explained. "The trial of wisdom will not be fought with strength, but with intellect and understanding. This door will open only when we prove that we are worthy of the knowledge hidden inside." Edgen glanced at the door, then back at Doric. "And how do we prove we're worthy?" Doric closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to something far beyond their reach. "The temple will test us. It will present us with a choice, a question we must answer, or a dilemma we must solve. The wrong choice. The wrong choice could be our last," Edgen finished, his stomach twisting. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's face it, then." With a solemn nod, Doric stepped forward, her hand reaching for the door. As her fingers brushed against the stone, the door rumbled and slowly began to open, revealing the chamber beyond. Inside, the chamber was vast, far larger than any of the others they had encountered in the temple. The walls were lined with enormous bookshelves, filled with dusty tomes and scrolls that seemed to hum with a quiet energy of their own. In the center of the room was a pedestal, upon which lay a large, ancient book, its pages yellowed with age, its cover emblazoned with the symbol of the eternal flame. A faint golden glow radiated from the book, as if it were alive with knowledge waiting to be unlocked. But it wasn't the book that drew their attention. At the far end of the room stood a figure, a tall, hooded figure, its face obscured in shadow. The figure's presence seemed to fill the room, the air thickening with an overwhelming sense of gravity. Edgen's hand instinctively went to his sword, but the figure made no move to attack. "Who are you?" Edgen called, his voice echoing through the chamber. "What is this place?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stepped forward, its movements smooth and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. It stopped just in front of the pedestal, and for the first time, it spoke. "I am the keeper of knowledge," it said, its voice low and resonant, as though it came from all directions at once. "I am the one who guards the secrets of the eternal flame. And you, adventurers, are here to prove yourselves." Edgin's heart skipped a beat. "Prove ourselves?" The keeper nodded. "In this chamber you will be tested. Not with your strength nor your magic, but with your wisdom. You must answer the questions that I pose to you. Fail, and you will be lost to time, forgotten like those who came before you." "Questions?" Doric repeated, her voice skeptical. "What kind of questions?" The keeper's eyes glowed faintly beneath the hood, and a sudden chill ran down Edgin's spine. "You will see," it said cryptically. "But know this, the answers you give will shape your fate. Choose wisely." The room grew still, the only sound the faint rustle of ancient scrolls, as though the very air was waiting. "Are you ready?" the keeper asked, its voice more pressing now, demanding an answer. Edgin glanced at his companions, each of them standing as one. There was no turning back. They had come this far, and they would see this trial through to the end. "We're ready," Edgin said, his voice steady. The keeper nodded once, then raised its hand. A shimmering light erupted from the pedestal, illuminating the chamber with a soft, golden glow. In the light, the keeper's form began to shift, becoming more translucent, as though it were fading into the very fabric of the temple itself. "The first question," the keeper said, its voice now a mere whisper. "What is the greatest force in the world? What is it that drives all living things?" Edgin's heart raced as the question reverberated in his mind. The answer seemed simple enough, yet there was something about it that felt elusive, as if the answer was not something to be taken lightly. "Is it love?" Doric suggested quietly, her voice unsure. "Love?" Helga snorted. "Come on, we're not here for philosophical riddles." But Edgin held up his hand, silencing the others. He thought carefully. It wasn't just about giving the first answer that came to his mind. It was about understanding the deeper meaning of the question. "The greatest force in the world," Edgin murmured. "It's not just love or war or power. It's the drive for survival. The instinct to continue. To live. That's what pushes us all forward." The keeper's form flickered, and the air seemed to shift. A soft sigh echoed through the room. "Correct," it said, its voice fading slightly. "Survival. The drive to live, to endure. You have passed the first test." Edgin exhaled, relief flooding through him. But he knew this was only the beginning. The keeper raised its hand again, and the golden light brightened once more, casting the room into a glow that was almost blinding. "The second question," it intoned. "What is the price of knowledge?" The golden light from the pedestal enveloped the room in a blinding radiance, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. The keeper's presence grew stronger with each passing moment, its form more ethereal and distant, as if it were tethered to something far beyond their understanding. "The second question," the keeper's voice echoed throughout the chamber, soft yet commanding, like the whisper of wind through the ages. "What is the price of knowledge?" Edgin's pulse quickened. The question was not as straightforward as the first. Love and survival were concepts that could be grasped with some measure of certainty. But this was a question that required a deeper understanding, one that made Edgin feel as if he were standing on the edge of a vast precipice. He glanced at his companions, their faces tense with thought. Doric's eyes were narrowed, her brow furrowed in concentration. Helga, ever pragmatic, was less concerned with philosophy, her fingers drumming impatiently on the hilt of her axe. Yet even she could sense the weight of the question hanging in the air. "The price of knowledge," Edgin murmured to himself. "It's not just the toll it takes on the mind, or the sacrifice of time. Knowledge demands something more. It demands change." "Change?" Helga repeated, clearly skeptical. "You mean like a price tag on a book?" "No," Edgin replied, shaking his head. "Not in the way you're thinking. Knowledge changes the way we see the world, how we interact with it. It can open doors but also close them. It's the cost of understanding that sometimes there is no going back. Once you know something, you can't unlearn it. The price of knowledge is the burden of the truth." A silence fell over the room. Even the faint hum of the temple seemed to pause, as if the walls themselves were listening. Doric stepped forward, her voice tentative. "You're saying that knowledge asks us to give up our innocence? That it's a burden, something that once learned, we can never escape?" Edgin nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the keeper. "Exactly. The more we know, the harder it is to turn back. It's a path that leads us forward, but it also leaves us with the weight of what we've learned. The keeper's form flickered, its golden light dimming as the room seemed to respond to Edgin's words. For a moment, the chamber grew still, a suffocating silence hanging over them like a shroud. Then the keeper's voice returned, more muted but still resonating through the air. "You have answered correctly," it said, its tone almost approving. "Knowledge comes at a price. Once it is acquired, the world can never be seen in the same light again. The price of knowledge is the burden of understanding, the challenge of knowing the world's true nature, and the inability to return to ignorance." Edgin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had feared that his answer might have been wrong, but now there was a sense of relief, however brief, that washed over him. Helga huffed in amusement. "Seems like a lot of weight for a question, but I guess that's why we're here. So, are we done yet?" The keeper's voice came again, this time with a hint of solemnity. "There is one final question, and it is the hardest of all." Edgin's heart skipped a beat. He had known that there was more to come, but the sense of finality in the keeper's voice made him uneasy. The air seemed to grow colder still, the golden light flickering in and out like a dying flame. "What is the nature of sacrifice?" the keeper asked, its voice growing distant, almost as though it were fading away. Doric stepped forward, her face set in concentration. "Sacrifice," she murmured to herself. "That's a question that cuts deep." Edgin felt a pang of unease. This question felt different, far more personal than the others. The first two had been abstract, philosophical in nature, but this one was rooted in the core of their very beings. Sacrifice. It was something that each of them had experienced, yet the true nature of it had never fully been revealed until now. "The nature of sacrifice," Edgin began, his voice quiet but resolute. "Sacrifice is not just about giving something up. It's not just about loss. It's the act of choosing to give something away, sometimes something precious, for a greater cause, for something greater than yourself." The keeper's voice echoed through the chamber. "And what is the greater cause?" it asked, the question hanging in the air like a weight too heavy to bear. Edgin's mind raced. A greater cause. What could that mean? The first two questions had been about survival, about understanding the world around them. But this was something that went beyond mere survival. He turned to his companions, and their eyes met. Helga's face was unreadable, her usual bravado tempered by the gravity of the moment. Doric's brow was furrowed, as though she were searching for the right words. In that brief exchange of glances, Edgin knew that they all understood. The answer wasn't just about them. It was about the journey they had been on, the sacrifices they had made, and the things they would have to give up in the name of their quest. "The greater cause," Edgin said softly, but with growing confidence, "is the future. It's the hope that what we sacrifice today will lead to something better tomorrow. It's the willingness to give up what we hold dear in order to ensure that others don't have to make the same sacrifices." The room seemed to hold its breath. The golden light grew brighter once more, but this time it wasn't blinding. It was warm, as if the light had come to embrace them. The keeper's figure flickered once more, and then it began to dissipate, as though it were merging with the very air itself. "You have answered correctly," the keeper's voice echoed one final time, now fading into silence. "Sacrifice is the willingness to give up something of value for a greater good. In your case, it is the very knowledge you seek, the power to change the world." A hush fell over the room, and for a moment, it felt as though the world itself was holding its breath. Then, as if responding to the keeper's approval, the pedestal at the center of the room began to glow even brighter, the light pulsating in rhythm with their hearts. The book that lay atop it seemed to vibrate with power, its cover lifting as though eager to reveal its secrets. Edgin stepped forward, his hand reaching toward the book. He could feel the weight of the moment, the culmination of everything they had endured. His fingers brushed the cover, and the book opened on its own, the pages flipping as though guided by an unseen force. Symbols and words danced across the pages, glowing in a language none of them recognized, yet somehow they understood. "The tablet," Edgin whispered, his voice barely audible. The book's pages began to shift, and the symbols morphed into something more familiar, runes of power, the coordinates of their final destination. The tablet was within their grasp. But the cost of their knowledge, the price of what they had just learned, was not lost on them. They had passed the trial of wisdom, but with it came an understanding of the deeper truths of the world. The journey had changed them, and there would be no going back. The keeper's final words echoed once more in their minds, a reminder of the gravity of their task. You are the ones who will change the world. But remember, the price of knowledge is not always what it seems. Edgen took a deep breath, standing tall. The tablet was within reach. The hardest part of their journey was yet to come. Chapter 9. The Burden of Knowledge. The chamber of the Temple of the Eternal Flame was silent now, save for the soft rustle of the ancient book's pages turning under an unseen force. Edgen stood before the pedestal, the glow of the book illuminating his face. His companions were close behind, each of them caught in a moment of quiet reflection. They had passed the trial of wisdom, but the weight of what they had learned pressed heavily on them, and the knowledge they had gained was more than they had bargained for. The keeper's final words still echoed in Edgen's mind. The price of knowledge is not always what it seems. What did it mean? They had answered the questions, passed the tests, but the looming presence of that warning made Edgen uneasy. He had thought that acquiring the tablet, the artifact they had come so far to find, would be the culmination of their journey. But now, standing in the heart of the temple, it felt like they were only just beginning to understand the full scope of their mission. Doric stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. What now? The book's opened. It's giving us what we need. The tablet, it's close. Edgen glanced at the pages, the strange symbols now seeming to arrange themselves into a map, marking the way forward. They had seen the coordinates before, but this time, the path was clearer. The temple had shared its secret, but there was something else. Something darker. There's something more, Edgen murmured. It's not just about the tablet. There's a force, a power that's tied to it. We're not the only ones after it. We've got to move faster. Halga grunted, eyeing the book with suspicion. And you're just figuring that out now? You didn't think this would be easy, did you? Edgen shot her a look, but Halga's sarcastic tone did little to quell his growing concern. He knew what the temple had revealed to him. It wasn't just a matter of retrieving the tablet anymore. They were up against forces far older, far more dangerous than they had imagined. And it wasn't only the power of the tablet that had drawn them here. It was the knowledge that came with it, the understanding of what such power could unleash. We need to go, Edgen said, his voice urgent. Now, without waiting for a reply, he turned on his heel and strode toward the door at the far end of the room, the others falling into step behind him. As they moved deeper into the temple, the air grew heavier, thick with the sense of something ancient stirring. The walls around them seemed to close in, the shadows flickering as though alive with intent. Doric's footsteps were quieter than the rest, and Edgen could hear the sound of her muttering under her breath as she cast an enchantment. I don't like this. The magic here is unstable. There's something else beneath the surface. What do you mean? Edgen asked, his voice low. Doric paused for a moment before responding, her voice tense. It's like the temple itself is alive. It's trying to hold us here. The knowledge, it's binding us. We need to be careful. The moment we leave, it's not just the tablet we're taking. It's something much more dangerous. Edgen didn't have time to consider her words further. They reached the final chamber, a vast and open space that seemed to stretch endlessly. The glow from the book still illuminated their path, but now, it seemed as if the very air around them was charged with energy, crackling with an ominous presence. The walls of this chamber were smooth, featureless stone, but at the center, a stone plinth stood, the surface polished and gleaming as if it were waiting for something to be placed upon it. In the center of the plinth rested the tablet, its form both beautiful and terrifying. It was inscribed with runes that shimmered with a strange light, and Edgen could feel the power radiating from it, thrumming in the very air. It called to him, a pull that was impossible to ignore. There it is, Edgen said, his voice reverberating in the vast chamber. Halga stepped forward, her fingers flexing around the haft of her axe. Let's get it and get out. I don't like this place. It feels like we're being watched. Doric frowned, her eyes scanning the room. Wait, something's wrong. Before anyone could react, the air shifted. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, and the ground beneath them trembled. The walls, once smooth, seemed to warp and twist as though they were alive. The temperature in the room plummeted, a chill settling over them that sank deep into their bones. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in tattered robes, its features hidden beneath a hood. The figure moved with a strange fluidity, its steps silent against the stone floor. It raised its hands, and as it did, the air around them shimmered, distorting as if reality itself was warping. We knew you would come, the figure spoke, its voice hollow and cold. The tablet was never meant for the likes of you. Edgin's heart raced. The figure didn't look like anything they had encountered before, but there was something familiar in the air around it. A sense of dread, of inevitable confrontation. Who are you? Edgin demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. The figure tilted its head, its voice a low whisper that seemed to resonate in the very depths of their minds. I am the guardian of the flame, the keeper of its secrets. You have trespassed in the sacred halls of this place, seeking what should never be unearthed. Doric's eyes narrowed. You guard the tablet? Not the tablet, the guardian replied. I guard the knowledge that comes with it. The knowledge that will change the world, that will bind the fates of all who seek it. But it is not meant for you. A flicker of understanding crossed Edgin's mind. You're not just guarding the tablet. You're guarding the power it contains. The guardian's form flickered, its image shifting as if it were becoming one with the air itself. The power is not to be wielded by those who do not understand it. It is a force beyond your reckoning, one that has the potential to destroy everything. We've come too far to turn back now, Edgin said, his voice firm. The tablet is ours to claim. The guardian's laughter was cold, devoid of any warmth. You think you can take it? You, who are blind to the consequences. You cannot claim what was never meant for you. With a sudden movement, the guardian extended its hand, and the very walls of the chamber seemed to come alive. Shadows twisted and writhed, reaching out as if to pull them into the darkness. The air crackled with power, and the ground beneath their feet shook violently. Halga charged forward, her axe raised high, but before she could strike, the shadows erupted, binding her in place. She struggled, but the darkness held fast, tightening around her like iron chains. Halga! Edgin shouted, rushing forward, but before he could reach her, a blast of energy shot from the guardian's outstretched hand, sending him tumbling back. Do you not see? The guardian intoned, its voice echoing around them. The power you seek is not a gift. It is a curse. You cannot control it. Doric raised her hands, casting a spell in an attempt to break the guardian's hold, but the magic fizzled against the barrier that the guardian had created. We won't let you stop us, she said through gritted teeth. The guardian's eyes, glowing with a cold, otherworldly light, fixed on Doric. You cannot stop what is already set in motion. Edgin's heart pounded in his chest. The guardian's words were true. They hadn't anticipated the full scale of what they were dealing with. But they had come too far to turn back. The tablet was within their reach, and the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Let her go, Edgin shouted, his voice filled with determination. Release her, or we'll take it from you. The guardian's gaze turned to him, its expression unreadable beneath the hood. For a moment, there was silence, and then the guardian spoke, its voice now carrying a hint of something almost like pity. You do not understand what you are asking, but if you are willing to face the consequences. A wave of energy surged from the guardian, and the shadows that held Halga loosened, allowing her to break free. But it wasn't over. The final trial had only just begun. The air around them buzzed with tension as Halga, her muscles straining against the last remnants of shadow, finally broke free. She stood tall, her hand gripping her axe, her face flushed with the effort and rage. The guardian, still cloaked in ethereal darkness, regarded them with a mixture of contempt and weariness, its cold eyes never leaving Edgin. Edgin's pulse raced in his veins. There was no turning back now. The tablet, no, the power contained within it, was too important. It was the key to the future, the salvation they'd sought for so long. But it was also a force that could destroy everything in its wake. The guardian was right. They hadn't fully understood what they were dealing with. But the path had already been set. We're not leaving without it, Edgin said, his voice steady, though his mind was still reeling from the guardian's words. You can't stop us. The guardian's form flickered once more, the shadows coiling around it like tendrils, but its expression softened, if only slightly. You don't understand what you're asking. Knowledge comes with a price that is more than your lives. Doric, her hands still crackling with the remnants of magic, stepped forward. We've paid a price already, she said. We've sacrificed enough. We're not turning back. The guardian's silence was its response, its cold gaze piercing their resolve. Enough talk, Halga growled, her patience worn thin. Without further warning, she lunged forward, her axe raised high. The moment her blade cut through the air, the shadows around the guardian seemed to pulse, but it was too late. The axe came down with a thunderous strike. But instead of meeting flesh, the axe sliced through a wall of dark energy, and Halga was thrown back, crashing into the stone floor with a grunt. "Watch out!" Edgin shouted, rushing toward her, but the guardian moved too quickly, its form blurring as it raised a hand, sending a pulse of energy straight toward him. The blast struck Edgin square in the chest, hurling him backward. He collided with the stone walls, his breath knocked from his lungs, but somehow, he managed to push himself back onto his feet. The guardian's voice reverberated in the room. "You are foolish to challenge what you do not understand. The tablet is not a weapon. It is a prison, and those who seek it will be trapped within its walls. You have no idea what you are dealing with." Doric raised her hands again, the air shimmering with the light of her magic. "Then tell us what it is," she demanded, her voice cracking with frustration. "Tell us why we should fear it." The guardian's eyes, glowing brighter now, fixed on her. "What lies within the tablet is not knowledge. It is a force, a curse that was sealed away long ago. Those who awaken it will be consumed by it, bound to its will. And when it is unleashed, the world will never be the same. The flames of creation and destruction will burn together, and everything you know will be lost." Edgin, his heart pounding in his chest, tried to force himself to focus. The guardian was right about one thing. They didn't fully understand the extent of the power they sought. But they had come too far to back down now. They had witnessed the horrors of the world falling into chaos, and the tablet was the only way to set things right. Or at least, that's what they had believed. "We've made our choice," Edgin said, his voice low and determined. "We're taking it." The guardian's response was a harsh laugh, the sound echoing through the chamber like the rattling of chains. "Then you will be the ones to carry the burden." Before they could react, the ground beneath their feet shifted again, the stone rumbling as if the very earth were alive. Shadows surged around them, the dark energy coiling like serpents, lashing out at the group. Edgin, his mind focused on nothing but the tablet, fought to regain control of the situation. "Stay close," he shouted to his companions. Halga was already charging forward, her axe raised once again, but the shadows closed in around her, attempting to ensnare her once more. Doric's magic flared to life, casting the darkness back with a flash of light, but it wasn't enough. The shadows were relentless, and with each pulse of energy, the room seemed to warp and twist, distorting reality itself. Edgin could feel it too. The weight of the tablet's power was bearing down on them. It was as if the very temple itself was fighting to keep them from claiming what was rightfully theirs. The guardian, now standing at the center of the chamber, was no longer just a figure of shadow and darkness. It was becoming something more, a manifestation of the temple's will, a force that would not allow them to leave with the knowledge they sought. "We have to reach it," Edgin said through gritted teeth. "We can't let it slip away." Doric, her face pale but resolute, nodded. "I can hold the shadows off for a moment, but you have to act quickly." Halga growled, her determination never wavering. "Then let's make this quick. I'm not letting some ghosts stop us now." With a nod from Edgin, they moved in unison. Doric's magic flared brighter than before, the light blinding in its intensity as it pushed the shadows back, creating a brief window of opportunity. Halga barreled forward, her axe swinging with deadly precision, cutting through the dark energy that still tried to hold her back. Edgin moved behind her, his eyes locked on the tablet, the artifact now within reach. The guardian, its form writhing with power, raised its hands once again, summoning the shadows to close in. "You are blind," it warned. "The cost of this path will be far greater than you realize. You cannot control what you awaken." But Edgin didn't stop. He could hear the urgency in the guardian's voice, but he had already made his decision. They had come too far to turn back. They had to take the tablet, no matter the cost. With a final push, Edgin reached the plinth and grabbed the tablet, the stone cool against his skin. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him. Power unlike anything he had ever felt before. The tablet hummed with life, its runes glowing brighter, the air crackling with the weight of its ancient magic. The guardian's voice was no longer a warning, it was a scream. "No!" The ground beneath them trembled violently, the very walls of the chamber shaking as if the temple itself was beginning to collapse. The shadows surged around them, trying to reclaim what had been taken. Halga and Doric fought with all their might, pushing back the darkness with every ounce of strength they had. But it was too late. The tablet was in Edgin's hands, and the knowledge within it had already begun to unfold. As the chamber continued to quake, the reality around them began to fracture. The walls seemed to warp, bending and twisting as if they were no longer bound by the laws of nature. The tablet's energy surged, flooding their minds with visions of the past, the present, and a future that seemed impossible to comprehend. Edgin's vision blurred, and he staggered as the power of the tablet overwhelmed him. He saw glimpses of a world on the brink of destruction, of cities crumbling, of lives lost. But amidst the chaos, there was hope. A chance to reshape the world, to guide it toward a future free of the darkness that had overtaken it. The Guardian's form twisted in agony as the shadows consumed it. "You cannot control it," it cried, its voice distorted by the magic flooding the chamber. "You are bound to the tablet now. You are its keeper, and its curse will never leave you." Edgin's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the truth settled over him. The Guardian's warning was not just about power, it was about responsibility. The tablet was not just a tool to change the world, it was a prison, and Edgin was now its keeper. The room exploded with light as the energy from the tablet reached its peak, the force knocking them all off their feet. And then everything went silent. Chapter 10. The Burden of the Tablet. The blinding light slowly receded, leaving the group in an eerie stillness. The air around them was thick, charged with the remnants of the power they had unleashed. Edgin stood, gripping the tablet with both hands, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphysical, pulling him down. The room around them had transformed, the walls now shifting and breathing as if alive. Shadows crept across the stone floor, moving with a malevolent grace. The Guardian had been consumed, its scream echoing in their minds, but its warning remained. "You are bound to it now," the words rang in Edgin's head, louder than ever. "The curse of the tablet will follow you. There is no escape." He shook his head, trying to clear the confusion swirling in his thoughts. The power coursing through him was overwhelming, a flood of images, sounds, and emotions that tore through his mind with the force of a storm. He could hear the voices of those who had come before him, whispers of ancient kings and forgotten gods, of empires built and destroyed in the blink of an eye. And then there was the future that was no longer a possibility but a reality, a truth that had already been set in motion. Edgin saw it all, the end of worlds, the rise of new ones, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. The tablet was not merely a relic of the past, it was a key to the future, a force that would shape the very fabric of existence itself. His mind was spinning, trying to process the magnitude of what he had just done. The tablet had given him a glimpse into the possible outcomes of his actions, some hopeful, some catastrophic. It was the same with every choice, every step taken. The future was not a fixed point, but a web of potential, each strand connected to countless others. He stumbled forward, shaking as the power continued to surge through him. The others, Halga, Doric, and Simon, were still recovering from the shock of the explosion that had knocked them down, but they were getting back to their feet. Halga was the first to speak, her voice hoarse but full of concern. "Edgin," she called, stepping forward. "What's happening? What did you see?" He turned to face her, his eyes wide, filled with the weight of what he had just experienced. "I saw everything. The future. It's all connected. The tablet. It's not just a weapon or a tool. It's a force of nature, a force that can create and destroy at will." Doric, ever the pragmatic one, frowned. "You're telling me we just took hold of something that can reshape the world?" Edgin nodded slowly, trying to process his own words. "Yes, but it's more than that. It's a curse, a burden. The Guardian, it wasn't just protecting the tablet. It was warning us. There is no going back from this." Halga grunted, tightening her grip on her axe. "Then we make our own future. I don't care about curses. We've come too far to let some old magic stop us." But Doric wasn't convinced. "The magic in this place, it's ancient. It's not just powerful, it's dangerous. You felt it, didn't you? The way it twisted around us. We need to leave before it consumes us." Edgin's gaze flickered toward the tablet, still glowing in his hands. The runes etched into its surface pulsed with a strange energy, as though it were alive. He could feel the weight of it, the pull of its power growing stronger by the second. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to release it. It was as if the tablet itself had become a part of him, its magic woven into his very soul. "Doric's right," Edgin said slowly. "This power is too much for any of us to control. We've seen the future. The possibilities are endless, but so are the consequences. The tablet, we can't just walk away from it." Simon, who had been standing silently off to the side, finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "Then what do we do now? We've come this far, but we can't just keep holding on to it forever." Edgen closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision that lay before him. He had never been the kind of man to shy away from responsibility. But this was different. The tablet was no longer just an artifact. It was a living entity, one that demanded more than they were prepared to give. "We have to destroy it," Edgen said quietly. "It's the only way." There was a moment of stunned silence. Holga was the first to react, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Destroy it? Are you crazy? We've fought for this for how long, and now you want to destroy it?" Doric, ever the voice of reason, stepped closer. "Edgen's right. It's too dangerous. If we don't destroy it, it will continue to shape our world, our future. We can't let that happen." Holga shook her head, a scowl forming on her face. "I'm not so sure. We've fought too hard for this. We can control it. We can use it to rebuild." But Edgen stood firm. "No. The tablet's power is too great. No one should wield it, not even us. It's tempting, I know. But we can't let it consume us." The air around them began to tremble again, the shadows of the temple deepening. It was as if the very walls were closing in on them, unwilling to let go of the power they had just stolen. The ground beneath their feet cracked, and the room began to shift once again. A low rumble echoed through the chamber. "We don't have much time," Edgen said urgently. "We need to act now." Doric nodded, stepping forward with a sense of resolve. "There's no other choice. We'll do it together." The group moved toward the center of the chamber, where the tablet rested. Holga, still reluctant, joined them, her grip on her axe tightening in frustration. But she could see the determination in Edgen's eyes. This wasn't a decision he had made lightly, and deep down, she knew it was the right one. The tablet was too powerful, too dangerous to be left in the wrong hands. Edgen took a deep breath and raised the tablet above his head, the power radiating from it like a storm. He could feel it, its energy coursing through his body, fighting against his will to let go. The future, the past, and the present all seemed to collide in his mind, the images flashing by faster than he could comprehend. But he didn't waver. He had made his choice, and he would not let the tablet control him. With a cry, Edgen slammed the tablet down onto the stone floor. The world seemed to shudder. For a moment, everything went dark. The shadows, the pulsing light, and the hum of the tablet all disappeared in an instant. It was as if time itself had come to a halt. Then, with a sudden, violent crack, the tablet shattered, its pieces scattering across the floor in a burst of light. The silence that followed was deafening. And then the air around them began to change. The shadows in the room retreated, the oppressive weight that had clung to them lifting, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they could breathe again. The room was still. The temple was still. The burden was gone. Edgen fell to his knees, exhausted but relieved. His hands, still trembling, reached for the shattered remains of the tablet. It was over. The future, for better or worse, was no longer bound to the tablet. "We did it," Doric said quietly, her voice filled with awe. Holga, her gaze still fixed on the scattered pieces, let out a long, relieved breath. "I don't know if I agree with you, Edgen, but I can't say I'm sorry it's done." Simon, always the optimist, smiled faintly. "The future's ours now, isn't it? We can shape it as we see fit." Edgen nodded, though his heart was heavy. The tablet may have been destroyed, but the burden it had placed on them would never fully fade. The knowledge, the power, it would live on in their memories, in their actions, and in the choices they made from here on out. The temple began to crumble around them, its ancient foundations shaking as if it, too, knew its purpose had come to an end. But the group had done what needed to be done. And as they left the temple, the light of the outside world filtering through the cracks in the stone, they knew that the true work was just beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, they felt ready to face it. As the temple's walls crumbled behind them, the group made their way out into the daylight, each of them silent, lost in their own thoughts. The air outside felt different, fresher, as if the very earth itself had exhaled a deep sigh of relief. They had destroyed the tablet, the source of so much power, fear, and mystery. But now, with its remnants scattered behind them, they had only each other and the uncertain world ahead. Edgen walked at the front, his steps slow but steady. The weight of their decision hung heavy on his mind. He had seen the future, glimpsed the paths they could have taken and the consequences of those paths. But the future was no longer set in stone. The power to shape it was now in their hands. "Do you think it was the right thing?" Simon asked, his voice breaking the silence. "Destroying it, I mean." Edgen didn't answer right away. The question echoed in his mind, a constant hum that wouldn't go away. Was it the right thing? How could they ever know? The power they had wielded, the choices they had made, it was all too much to fully comprehend. I think it was the only thing, Edgen finally said, his voice quiet. We couldn't let that kind of power fall into the wrong hands. It would have consumed us and everyone else in the end. Helga grunted, her brow furrowed as she adjusted the straps of her armor. It's hard to believe it's over. That thing, whatever it was like a whole other world, and now it's gone. Doric, who had remained mostly silent during their walk, glanced at the horizon, her expression unreadable. The world hasn't changed yet. It's not like we've saved it, not by destroying the tablet. We've just removed one possibility. The future is still as fragile as it was before. Simon nodded, his face solemn. But we have a chance to make a difference. We don't have to be controlled by what the tablet showed us. We can still choose. Edgen's eyes flickered to the horizon as well. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the ruins of the temple. It was beautiful, in an unsettling way, a reminder that even as the past crumbled away, the future remained in constant flux. We'll have to choose carefully, Edgen said, his tone filled with the weight of experience. There's still so much we don't understand. We've seen the damage that kind of power can cause, but there's also a chance to build something new. A world that isn't governed by destiny, but by the choices we make. The road ahead would not be easy. Edgen knew that. They had destroyed a powerful artifact, but the forces it had unleashed were still at play. The shadows of the past lingered, and with them, the forces that had sought to control and shape the world through fear and manipulation. There were still enemies out there, still those who would seek to exploit the chaos left in the wake of the tablet's destruction. Helga broke the silence, her voice low and resolute. We've got each other, right? We can take on whatever comes next. Doric gave her a half-smile. Right. Together, we've come this far. We can make it through whatever comes next. But this time, we're doing it on our terms. The weight of the tablet's curse was no longer on their shoulders, but Edgen felt the remnants of its power still thrumming in the air. He knew the choices they made would ripple out, touching lives in ways they couldn't even imagine. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had the chance to shape it. As the last of the temple's ruins disappeared behind them, the group pressed forward, leaving the past behind. They had destroyed the source of their burden, but now they carried with them the knowledge of what was at stake, and the hope that they could do better. The journey would continue, and while they did not know what awaited them, they knew they could face it. Together. And so, my friends, if this tale has moved you, if it has sparked something deep within, a curiosity, a lesson, or even a moment of joy, then let it not end here. Share it with others who hunger for adventure, who long to explore worlds unknown. Spread the word, for stories are meant to be shared. Should you wish to journey alongside us again, to uncover more mysteries and tales untold, then join us. Follow this path, and let your voice echo with ours. Together, we can craft new adventures, weaving dreams into reality. Until next time, my friends, may your paths be bold, your choices wise, and your hearts ever open to the wonders of the world. Like the heroes of this tale, your story, too, is worth sharing.